Chapter 1702. Tang Hai hurriedly waved his hand. The netherworld sword and dagger immediately stopped, looking at Qin Feiyong in confusion. Qin Feiyong smiled and looked at the undead. Let's talk in another way. Are you guarding something here? Guarding? Tang Hai was surprised and looked at the undead suspiciously. But the undead still didn't respond. Qin Feiyong said, "Don't worry, I'm a man of my word. As long as you're willing to tell me, I'll let you go right away." The undead didn't move. Qin Feiyong didn't rush it and just silently looked at it. A moment later, the undead finally nodded. Qin Feiyong was secretly happy and asked, "What are you guarding?" The undead pointed at the hall. Qin Feiyong hurriedly turned around to look. The hall was already shattered, and there was nothing left. Wait a minute. Suddenly, Qin Feiyong glanced at the broken ground. Could it be the thing it was guarding was underground? Thinking of this, he immediately said, "Tang Hai, quickly use your inner sight to search the underground." Tang Hai was surprised, then released his inner sight and rushed into the ground. Soon, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Qin Feiyong asked, "Did you find something?" "Yes, there's a secret room underground. In the secret room, there's a broken skeleton. Next to the skeleton is a chenkuan bag and a rusty axe," Tang Hai said. Qin Feiyong looked at the undead and asked, "Is this what you're guarding?" The undead nodded. Qin Feiyong asked, "Why are you guarding these things? Is it related to you?" The undead was silent for a while, then nodded again. "It's really related?" Qin Feiyong was surprised, then suddenly thought of something and asked in surprise, "Could it be that the skeleton in the secret room is you?" The undead nodded. "No wonder you wanted to drive us away, so you didn't want us to destroy your body." "Don't worry, we won't destroy your body. I'll keep my word and let you go." Qin Feiyong smiled at the undead, then turned to Tang Hai and said, "Let's go down." Tang Hai nodded. Divine power gushed out from his body as he brought Qin Feiyong straight underground. The cage that trapped the undead also dissipated. The undead immediately turned into a black shadow and rushed out of the city. At the same time, from the north, two silhouettes streaked across the sky like lightning. It was an old man and a young boy. The old man was in his 60s and his hair was mottled with white spots. He held a walking stick in his hand and his body was stooped. He wore black linen clothes and his aura was unfathomable. The younger one was a young man about 20 years old. He was about 1.8 meters tall and was also wearing a black linen robe. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and his eyes were as cold as a sharp blade. The aura of the young man was extremely terrifying too. What about the city? The young man came to the outside of the ancient city. When he saw the destroyed city, his eyes were full of surprise. The old man scanned the void and said in a deep voice, "There are still obvious battle fluctuations here. It seems that someone has beaten us to it." "Bastard!" The young man was flustered and exasperated. His eyebrows were full of hostility. Suddenly, at a certain spot in the void, he caught sight of a black shadow. That's right. It was the undead. The young man hurriedly pointed at the undead and shouted, "Second Grandpa, it's her." The black-clothed old man's eyes flashed. He took a step forward as if he had teleported. In a few breaths, he stood in front of the undead. Seeing the black-clothed old man, the undead was obviously a little panicked and quickly turned around to flee. "Humph!" The black-clothed old man snorted coldly. The walking stick in his hand stamped on the void, and a terrifying divine power suddenly rushed toward the undead. "Second Grandpa, don't kill her." The young man hurriedly flew over. The black-clothed old man waved his hand, and the divine power immediately turned into a cage of more than 100 feet, imprisoning the undead. Then he looked at the young man who flew away and asked, "Why don't you kill her?" The young man landed beside the black-clothed old man and said with a sinister smile, "3 days ago, I almost died in her hands. How can I let her die so easily?" The black-clothed old man nodded, and the cage quickly shrank. Finally, the cage shrank to the size of a palm. The undead was trapped inside just like that. The young man stepped forward, grabbed the cage and sneered, "When I get the treasures you left behind, I'll take care of you slowly." Finished. He looked at the black-clothed old man and urged, "Second Grandpa, let's hurry up. Don't let others beat us to it. Lead the way." The black-clothed old man said. The young man immediately led the black-clothed old man to the location of the main hall. Back to Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai. At this moment, the two were standing in front of a stone door. The stone door was 3 meters high and 1.5 meters wide, exuding a strong and ancient aura. The secret room that Tang Hai had explored before was behind this stone door. Tang Hai took out a black dagger and slashed at the stone door. Crack! The stone door was directly split into 2 halves. Everything inside immediately appeared in front of the two of them. The secret room was about 10 feet long. The skeleton was sitting cross-legged in the center of the secret room. On the ground beside it, there was a Xueqi bag and an axe. The axe, as Tang Hai said, was indeed rusty. Qin Feiyong was about to enter the secret room, but Tang Hai suddenly reached out to stop him. Qin Feiyong looked at Tang Hai suspiciously. Tang Hai, however, glanced at the secret room warily, then entered the secret room and carefully checked it. After confirming that there was no danger, he nodded to Qin Feiyong. "This person is quite careful." Qin Feiyong muttered, entered the secret room, and went straight to the skeleton. The skeleton was missing an arm. Several bones on its back were also broken. Obviously, the skeleton was seriously injured before it died. Qin Feiyong carefully looked at the skeleton's sternum and pelvis, and nodded. "This is indeed the skeleton of a woman. It seems that the undead did not lie to us, but who injured her?" The skeleton of a woman and a man were different in some places, and it was easy to distinguish. "It doesn't matter who injured her. What's important is the Xueqi bag and this axe," Tang Hai said, grabbing the Xueqi bag with one hand and the axe with the other. The axe was very small, about the size of an adult's palm. There was a skull on the handle. The whole axe was covered with a layer of rust, and there was no aura, nor any sharpness. It looked like an ordinary axe with rust. Qin Feiyong looked at the skeleton again, walked to Tang Hai, and said, "Let me see." Tang Hai handed the axe to Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong grabbed the axe, carefully observed it for a while, and gently flicked the blade with his fingers. Immediately, Qin Feiyong's face was full of horror. With such a gentle flick, his finger was cut by the axe blade. Buzz! Clang! And at the same time, the axe blade trembled, vibrating with an extremely deep metallic sound without any impurities. This sound... Tang Hai stared at the axe, and Qin Feiyong's bleeding finger, his eyes full of surprise. One had to know. Qin Feiyong had the body of a pseudo-god, and it had been tempered by the essence of the divine flesh. The strength of his physical body could be said to be far beyond that of other pseudo-gods. Ordinary weapons could not hurt him at all. Not to mention such a rusty axe. It was rusty, but it could still hurt Qin Feiyong. What did this mean? It meant this was not an ordinary axe at all. Whoosh! Just when the two of them were surprised, accompanied by the sound of breaking air, 2 figures rushed into the secret room. It was the young man and the old man in black. Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai came back to their senses and looked up at the two. When they saw the imprisoned dead spirit in the young man's hands, their pupils suddenly shrank. They had personally experienced the strength of the dead spirit, which was comparable to a god of war, but it was actually captured by these 2 people. Qin Feiyong could see through the young man's cultivation at a glance. 9-star combat emperor at the peak realm. But Qin Feiyong could not see through the old man in black's cultivation. Tang Hai said telepathically, "I can't see through his cultivation either." What? Qin Feiyong's gaze trembled. Even Tang Hai could not see through it? Could it be that this old man was a god of war at the initial stage? The young man and the old man in black were also sizing up Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai at the same time. These 2 people are not simple. That young man has a pseudo-god, and the masked man is a god of war at the initial stage. The most important thing is that I have never seen them before. The old man in black said to himself. Pseudo-god, initial stage god of war. The young man murmured with a hint of disdain in his eyes. He looked at Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai and shouted, "Who are you? How dare you steal this young master's treasure?" "Your treasure?" Qin Feiyong looked at the young man in a daze and said suspiciously, "Isn't this the dead spirit's? How did it become yours?" "If I say it's mine, then it's mine," the young man said proudly. "So that's how it is." Qin Feiyong suddenly smiled. He thought, this young man and old man might have some relationship with the dead spirit. But in the end, He was thinking too much. The young man was simply trying to snatch it by force. Qin Feiyong turned his gaze and looked at the old man in black. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Senior, we are all reasonable people. Everything should be based on first come, first served. This young master has long had his eyes on the things here. Now tell this young master, who came first and who came later?" The young man said. Qin Feiyong looked at the young man and said faintly, "There seems to be a difference between having your eyes on it and getting it." "What? Are you really going to take it for yourself in front of this young master?" The young man's eyes were cold, and he looked at Qin Feiyong playfully and asked. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed with a murderous intent. He looked at the old man in black and said with a smile, "Senior, is that what you mean? Who are you? Which force do you belong to? Why haven't this old man seen you before?" The old man in black didn't answer but asked instead, "Which force?" Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai looked at each other. What did he mean? Were there many people in this ancient world? Seeing Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai didn't speak for a long time, the old man in black raised his eyebrows slightly and shouted, "Speak!" At the same time, divine power emerged and rushed toward Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai. "Give an inch and you want a mile." Tang Hai secretly snorted and disappeared in an instant. The next moment, he appeared in front of the young man. His big hand was like an eagle's claw, and he grabbed the young man's neck. "What? So fast?" The old man in black changed his expression. Chapter 1703. Tang Hai grabbed the young man and returned to Qin Feiyong's side. The black-clothed old man's face darkened and he shouted, "Let him go! If I let him go just because you said so, how can I give you face? Actually, I've already given you enough face. Because at first, I didn't make a move, and I even respectfully called you senior. But what about you? Taking advantage of your seniority and arrogance. I want to ask, who the hell are you? How dare you be so arrogant in front of me?" Qin Feiyong sneered. This merciless humiliation made the black-clothed old man's face turn green and red. He said word by word, "Young man, don't be too arrogant." "Arrogant? I'm still considered low-key. You didn't see when I was even more arrogant." Qin Feiyong smiled disdainfully, looked at Tang Hai, and said, "Give me your dagger." Tang Hai handed the dagger in his hand to Qin Feiyong. Divine weapon. The black-clothed old man stared at the dagger, and his eyes trembled slightly. With his eyesight, he could tell at a glance that this dagger was extraordinary. He finally realized that something was wrong. This time, he might have kicked an iron plate. Qin Feiyong took the dagger, glanced at the black-clothed old man, and said with a faint smile, "You said I'm arrogant, right? Then I'll show you." As soon as he finished speaking, he slashed at the young man's arm. The young man suddenly screamed, and his arm was cut off on the spot, and blood spurted out of the bowl-sized wound. The trapped undead also slipped out of his hand and fell to the ground. The young man roared, "How dare you cut off my arm? You're courting death." A cold light flashed in Tang Hai's eyes. He raised his other arm and slammed it on the young man's mouth. Crack! The young man's teeth were shattered on the spot. His mouth was also badly mutilated, and the pain was heart-wrenching. "You'd better shut up, or you won't even know how you died." Qin Feiyong looked at the young man contemptuously, then returned the dagger to Tang Hai. Then he bent down, picked up the imprisoned undead, and asked, "Are you okay?" The undead struggled madly in the cage. Qin Feiyong raised his head and looked at the black-clothed old man. Killing intent flashed in his eyes as he said, "Let her go immediately." "You know her?" The black-clothed old man frowned. "No, I don't," Qin Feiyong said. "I don't know her. Why are you helping her?" The black-clothed old man didn't understand. "It's my pleasure. What can you do about it?" Qin Feiyong grinned. The black-robed old man's face was gloomy as he said, "You'd better figure out who is standing in front of you right now." "Really? Then tell me, who are you?" Qin Feiyong was curious. "An existence you can't afford to offend." The black-clothed old man said word by word. "Can't afford to offend him?" "Ha ha," Qin Feiyong laughed loudly, and a cold light flashed in his eyes as he said, "Then I will also let you see the consequences of provoking me. Old Tang, cut off his other arm for me." "How dare you?" The black-clothed old man was furious. However, before his voice died away, the young man let out a painful scream. The other arm was cut off cleanly by Tang Hai. Then Tang Hai glanced at the black-clothed old man, his eyes full of ridicule. "Second grandpa, listen to him. Let the undead go." The young man roared. It was too late for regrets. How could he be so unlucky to meet two people who were as good as him? "You will pay the price." The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyong with a grim expression. With a wave of his old arm, the cage was immediately shattered. The undead escaped and hid behind Qin Feiyong's back. "Let him go!" the black-clothed old man shouted. "Let him go!" Qin Feiyong raised the corner of his mouth slightly and said with a smile, "Do you think I am an idiot? If I let him go, you will immediately attack us. What do you want?" The black-clothed old man said in a deep voice. "Tell me, who are you? Why are you in the ancient world?" Qin Feiyong said. The black-clothed old man was stunned and said in surprise, "You are not from the ancient world? Is there a difference?" Qin Feiyong said calmly. The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyong's expression and said in a deep voice, "You are indeed not from the ancient world." Qin Feiyong said, "I didn't say that. This is just your wishful thinking. Stop pretending. What kind of people have I not seen? You want to pretend in front of me? You are still too young." The black-clothed old man sneered. Qin Feiyong revealed an astonished expression. "This old thing is quite perceptive." He smiled and said, "It seems that you won't tell me. If that's the case, I can only use my own methods to obtain the answer I want." Finished. He formed a seal with both hands. A puppet imprint appeared and entered the young man's head like lightning. Boom. But when the puppet imprint entered the young man's head and rushed to his soul, it seemed to have touched some taboo. A terrifying killing intent suddenly rushed out from the young man's soul. The puppet imprint shattered on the spot. Qin Feiyong's body trembled and he suffered a backlash. The purple gold dragon blood in his mouth spurted out. "What? It's actually the purple gold dragon blood." The black-clothed old man stared at the purple gold dragon blood in horror and roared, "Who are you to Qin Batian?" Qin Feiyong was slightly stunned and said in surprise, "How do you know Qin Batian?" Boom. However, before he finished speaking, the killing intent in the young man's sea of consciousness suddenly emerged from between his eyebrows and rushed toward Tang Hai. At this moment, even Tang Hai felt the threat of death. Without any hesitation, he directly threw the young man away and took Qin Feiyong and the undead. He smashed the stone above the secret room with a punch and rushed to the ground like lightning. The black-clothed old man quickly went forward and caught the young man. He asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Second grandpa, we must not let them escape," the young man said resentfully. "Don't worry, they can't escape." The black-clothed old man smiled and chased out like lightning. The killing intent also rushed into the young man's eyebrows and disappeared. Qin Feiyong. Tang Hai had already rushed to the ground with him and the undead. Qin Feiyong said in a deep voice, "Tang Hai, what was that?" "That was the killing intent of a war god. And the owner of that killing intent was stronger than that old man. According to my estimation, he was at least a war god in the Dashang stage." Tang Hai said. "War god in the Dashang stage?" Qin Feiyong's eyes trembled. Who were these people? What secrets were hidden in this ancient world? Why did they recognize the ancestor? The fire python said that the ancestor was directly forced to the third floor and had never been to the ancient world. It was reasonable to say that the people here should not know the ancestor. What was going on? Boom. Just as Qin Feiyong was deep in thought, the black-clothed old man flew out from the ground with a murderous aura. Tang Hai's expression changed and he hurriedly said, "Young master, this person's strength is unfathomable. We can't fight him head-on." "What are you afraid of?" Qin Feiyong smiled coldly and took out the ancient castle. "I want to understand all of this. Cripple him for me." When Tang Hai saw the ancient castle, his confidence soared. "Surrender immediately and I'll spare your lives." The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai and shouted. His terrifying divine power rushed toward the two of them. "I'll return this sentence to you word for word." Tang Hai smiled coldly and grabbed the ancient castle. His god power surged into the castle like a tide. Boom. The ancient castle suddenly released a shocking power. The black-clothed old man's body trembled and he stared at the ancient castle in surprise. Tang Hai took a step forward and directly faced the black-clothed old man's divine power. The power of the ancient castle destroyed the world. With a boom, the divine power immediately collapsed. The black-clothed old man was dumbfounded. What kind of divine artifact was this? How could it contain such terrifying power? At this time, the young man also flew out. When he saw the ancient castle, an indescribable fear suddenly emerged in his heart. Even the guardian of the miracle doesn't dare to challenge the young master. Where did you borrow the courage from? With the ancient castle in hand, the world was mine. Tang Hai was in high spirits and unscrupulously charged toward the black-clothed old man. Guardian of the miracle. The black-clothed old man's face became even paler. He decisively turned around and fled with the young man. Qin Feiyong shouted, "You must not let them escape." Yes. Tang Hai didn't even turn his head as he responded. His footsteps were strange as he chased after the two men. Although I obtained the treasure you left behind when you were alive, I also saved your life just now. We can be considered even. In the future, you're on your own. Qin Feiyong turned his head to look at the undead and said a few words. He then used the walk formula and chased after Tang Hai. The undead turned into a human figure, suspended in the void, as if watching Qin Feiyong's back. A moment later, the undead also turned into an afterimage and disappeared like lightning. His speed is really fast. In the sky above the desolate land, the black-clothed old man fled with the young man. The young man turned his head and looked at Tang Hai, who was chasing behind him, his face full of shock. The black-clothed old man said in a deep voice, "He should have mastered an extremely terrifying auxiliary divine art. Then can we escape?" The young man panicked. "Of course." The black-clothed old man smiled contemptuously and said, "Although his speed is very fast, this old man is not to be trifled with." But that young man really surprised this old man. "Young man? You mean the person with the purple gold dragon blood?" The young man said. "Who else could it be? The purple gold dragon blood is the rarest bloodline power in the world. It is said that only the descendants of the purple gold divine dragon have such bloodline power." The black-clothed old man said. "The descendant of the purple gold divine dragon? Could it be that he is the child of the purple gold divine dragon and a human?" The young man said. "Most likely. Otherwise, how could he have the bloodline power of the purple gold dragon blood? Do you still remember that there was a person called Qin Batian?" The black-clothed old man said. "I remember. Although I was very young at that time, many people were talking about him." The young man said. "Qin Batian also has the bloodline power of the purple gold dragon blood. These two people must have an unusual relationship. This person is very likely to be the descendant of Qin Batian." The black-clothed old man said. "So what if he is the descendant of Qin Batian?" The young man was puzzled. "You don't understand. Those who have the purple gold dragon blood have extraordinary talent and are all people with great luck. As long as they don't die prematurely, they will become great people. The most important thing is that when Qin Batian entered the ancient world, he offended many people. As the saying goes, the son pays the father's debt. If that person is really the descendant of Qin Batian, we can use him to achieve our goal." Chapter 1704. What purpose? The young man was surprised. The black-robed old man shook his head and said, "You are too weak now. There are some things you should not know. I am already a 9-star combat emperor at the peak of the martial emperor realm. I am one step away from the pseudo-god realm. Is this still too weak?" The young man was not convinced. Is a 9-star combat emperor at the peak of the martial emperor realm that great? Do you know how long that young man has been cultivating? According to this old man's observation, he has only cultivated for 100 or 200 years at most, but he has already stepped into the pseudo-god realm. Compared to him, you are still far behind. So don't be complacent. There are many people who are stronger than you." The black-robed old man reprimanded mercilessly. The young man pursed his lips and said, "He has the power of the purple gold dragon blood. Of course he is faster than me. That's not the point. Forget it. You have too little experience. You might not be able to understand some things even now." After the black-robed old man finished speaking, The divine light under his feet surged, and his speed suddenly soared. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from Tang Hai's sight. Tang Hai raised his eyebrows and stopped decisively. Soon, Qin Feiyong caught up, glanced at the void and asked, "Where is he?" "That old man's cultivation is higher than mine, and he also cultivated an auxiliary divine art. I can't catch up." Tang Hai shook his head. "Damn it!" Qin Feiyong cursed secretly. Tang Hai bowed and said, "Young master, please punish me. This is not your fault." "Why should I punish you?" Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes at him, glanced around the land and murmured, "This ancient world is really an interesting place." "I don't find it interesting. I just feel that danger is everywhere," Tang Hai said. Qin Feiyong was speechless. He looked at Tang Hai and said, "I am really curious. What kind of face is under your mask?" Tang Hai instinctively touched the mask below. It was broken? He was stunned. Then he remembered that it seemed to have broken when the third elder exploded. He immediately turned around, took out a brand new mask, and put it on his face. From the beginning to the end, he did not let Qin Feiyong see his real face. "You are not a woman. Why are you hiding it?" Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes. Tang Hai said, "My appearance is too scary. I'm afraid I'll scare you." Lame excuse. Qin Feiyong pursed his lips. Tang Hai did not seem to want to continue discussing this issue. He asked, "What are we going to do next?" "Wait. That old man knows the ancestor. When he sees that I also have purple gold dragon blood, he will definitely connect me to the ancestor. I think that if nothing unexpected happens, he will come looking for me again. However, the next time you come looking for me, there should be a large group of experts around you. Are you afraid?" Qin Feiyong asked with a smile. Tang Hai looked at the castle in his hand and shook his head. Qin Feiyong smiled and took back the ancient castle from Tang Hai's hands. Then, he took out the Qianquan bag and the axe. "This axe is definitely not simple," Tang Hai said. "Check your cosmos sac." Qin Feiyong threw the cosmos sac to Tang Hai, then cut the tip of his index finger. Drops of purple gold dragon blood dripped onto the axe. However, the axe did not absorb the purple gold dragon blood. "What's going on?" Qin Feiyong frowned. Was this really just an ordinary axe? Because only in this way could it not be bound by blood. But earlier, the axe had indeed been able to easily cut through his skin. Tang Hai looked up at Qin Feiyong and said, "There are only some medicinal materials, elixirs, and gold coins in this cosmos sac." "Nothing else?" Qin Feiyong frowned. "No." Tang Hai shook his head. But his expression suddenly froze and he said, "Wait." Immediately after, he took out a jade box from the cosmos sac. The jade box was the size of a palm, dull in color, simple and unadorned. It looked extremely ordinary. However, Tang Hai, on the other hand, sensed a dense and mysterious energy from the jade box. He glanced at Qin Feiyong and opened the jade box. Boom! Immediately, a majestic energy roared out of the jade box. Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai immediately felt as if they were bathing in a sea of essence. The pores all over their body opened involuntarily, and they felt extremely comfortable. The two lowered their heads and looked at the things in the jade box, their eyes full of surprise. Inside the jade box, there was a crystal stone lying quietly. The crystal stone was the size of a baby's fist. It was gray all over and exuded a hazy glow. That energy was emitted from this crystal stone. And the energy emitted by the crystal stone was full of divine essence. "What is this?" Tang Hai was suspicious. "I don't know. I've never seen it before." Qin Feiyong shook his head and said, "But this energy seems to be absorbable." After the energy entered his body, he could clearly feel that it merged with the soul in his sea of consciousness. It can be absorbed. This energy seems to have the same effect as the spirit congealing pill. It can condense divine sense. No. To be exact, the energy is purer and more amazing than the spirit congealing pill. Tang Hai said. Qin Feiyong was taken aback and asked, "You mean this crystal stone is used for cultivation?" "It should be." Tang Hai took out the gray crystal stone and held it in the palm of his hand. Immediately, the energy in the crystal stone surged into his body. His body trembled slightly, and he looked at Qin Feiyong and said, "I'm sure that this is used for cultivation, and the effect is better than the spirit congealing pill. I estimate that the energy contained in this crystal stone is comparable to hundreds of spirit congealing pills with 5 or 6 patterns. This? Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded. Tang Hai was talking about the spirit congealing pills with 5 or 6 patterns. As an alchemist, he naturally knew what the concept of 5 or 6 patterns was. The energy contained in this crystal stone was actually comparable to hundreds of spirit congealing pills with 5 or 6 patterns. This was too surprising. What kind of treasure was it? Qin Feiyong took the crystal stone from Tang Hai's hand, and the majestic divine energy suddenly poured into his body, passing through his limbs and bones, and finally gathered in his sea of consciousness and poured into his soul. Sure enough, as Tang Hai said, the energy contained in the crystal stone was amazing and terrifying. And there were no impurities at all, and it was extremely pure. Even in this short period of time, 3 strands of divine sense were born in his sea of consciousness. Qin Feiyong reluctantly put the gray crystal stone into the jade box, and looked at Tang Hai and said, "See if there are any more such crystal stones in your Chengkuan bag?" Tang Hai nodded, and after a careful search he shook his head and said, "No, this is the only one." Such a magical treasure should be something that can only be encountered by chance. Qin Feiyong sighed. Not necessarily. It's very magical in our eyes, but it may be just an ordinary thing in the eyes of others. After all, our understanding of the war god and above is too shallow. Why don't we look for it again? If we're lucky, maybe we can find a few relics left by the war god? Tang Hai suggested. Okay. Qin Feiyong nodded. If there were relics, there might be this magical gray crystal stone. However, what was the deal with this axe? Qin Feiyong lowered his head and looked at the axe. The edge of the axe was covered by rust, but it was certain that this was definitely a divine object. But why couldn't it recognize its owner by blood? Qin Feiyong's mind was full of doubts. He simply stopped thinking about it, put away the axe, and looked around. Let's go over there and look. Qin Feiyong pointed in the direction of the old man in black. First, look for the relics. Second, wait for the old man in black. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Swish. But suddenly, a black shadow appeared in front of the 2. It's you? Qin Feiyong was surprised. The one who came was the undead from before. Tang Hai looked at the undead warily and asked, "Why are you following us? What's your intention?" The undead was silent. "You don't want to say?" Tang Hai's eyes suddenly surged with killing intent. The undead waved her hand, turned around without saying a word, and rushed to the west. What do you mean? Tang Hai was stunned. Qin Feiyong guessed, "Look at her, she should be taking us somewhere." Tang Hai frowned and said, "We'd better stay away from this kind of damn thing." Qin Feiyong was stunned, looked at Tang Hai with a strange look, and said, "Can I understand that you are afraid of the undead?" "How is that possible? I am the god of war. Why would I be afraid of a mere undead?" Tang Hai said angrily. "You confessed without being pressed. If you are not afraid, why are you so agitated?" Qin Feiyong smiled jokingly. Tang Hai lowered his head in embarrassment. "Well, although the undead is an ominous thing, this one seems to have no malice. Let's follow and have a look." Qin Feiyong smiled. Okay. Tang Hai nodded. He could only bite the bullet, otherwise he would definitely be laughed at by Qin Feiyong. Tang Hai waved his hand and quickly caught up with the undead with Qin Feiyong. But they always kept a distance. Time flew by. Night fell. The whole ancient world gradually fell into deep darkness. Tang Hai also lost his patience. He looked at the undead and said, "Where are you taking us?" The undead suddenly stopped. Tang Hai quivered and immediately stopped. He took Qin Feiyong and retreated a few steps. His expression was full of vigilance. The undead pointed to the left. Tang Hai and Qin Feiyong were stunned and looked in the same direction. Night shrouded the whole earth. There was dead silence all around. However, with the cultivation of Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai, they could clearly see through the darkness. And just a few hundred miles to the left, there was a huge valley. The valley was surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, towering into the clouds, and there was only one entrance. Looking from a distance, it was full of a mysterious and gloomy feeling. Qin Feiyong withdrew his gaze and looked at the undead, asking, "The place you want to take us to is that valley?" The undead nodded and continued to move forward. Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai looked at each other and immediately followed. But in the face of the unknown valley, Qin Feiyong also began to be vigilant. A few hundred miles was nothing for the three of them. Soon, they landed in front of the entrance of the valley. The undead directly took the two of them into the valley. The valley was very large, estimated to be a few miles, but like the outside, there was no grass, only desolation. The undead did not stop and went straight to the center of the valley, then lowered his head and stared ahead. Chapter 1705. The pool was very small, only 4 or 5 meters in diameter. However, the water in the pool was very strange. It was actually black. There were no waves in the water, like a dead pool, revealing a bit of strangeness. Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai looked at each other, walked to the pool, looked down for a moment, and found that the water was emitting an unusual stench. This stench went into the nostrils, making people feel dizzy. "There's poison in the water." Qin Feiyong's face suddenly changed. "Poison!" Tang Hai was shocked, took a few steps back, picked up a stone under his feet, and threw it into the pool. Dong! Boom! A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The tranquil pond immediately surged with waves. At the same time, a cold and fierce aura, like a volcano, erupted from the bottom of the pool. Tang Hai shouted, "Young master, retreat!" Qin Feiyong quickly retreated. But Tang Hai did not move, staring at the pool. The movement in the pool was getting louder and louder. The waves splashed. It was as if there was a terrible demon sealed in the pool, and at this moment, it was gradually awakening. Tang Hai became more and more vigilant. In the palm of his hand, divine power was surging, and he was already secretly accumulating power. Splash! Soon, as a column of water rose to the sky, a black shadow rushed out of the pool like lightning, going straight for Tang Hai's eyebrows. A strong sense of crisis swept over his heart. Tang Hai's eyes were cold, raised his arm, and slapped the black shadow. Ah! The black shadow immediately let out a shrill scream, and the figure suddenly collapsed. This is... Qin Feiyong's pupils contracted. The black shadow collapsed, and there was no flesh and blood. It was obviously another undead. Could it be? He looked at the pool and his eyes flashed. Could it be that there was also an ancient site left behind by the god of war under the pool? He. After the undead was defeated by Tang Hai's palm, it turned into a black mist that churned in the void. Release. The man's hideous laughter echoed in the night sky, like the roar of a ghost. Playing tricks, you're courting death. Tang Hai's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and divine power surged out, and the valley collapsed in an instant. It's a ghost. How can it be playing tricks? Qin Feiyong was speechless. But as soon as he spoke, he immediately attracted the undead's attention. The undead immediately avoided Tang Hai and fiercely rushed towards Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong was stunned and coldly shouted, "Do you think I'm easy to bully?" After saying that, he took out the ancient castle and smashed it on the ground. Ah! The undead wailed again and hurriedly fled in horror. However, at this moment, the female undead who had been standing motionlessly beside Qin Feiyong suddenly soared into the air and pounced at the undead. The two undead immediately became entangled in the void. But not long after, all the dead spirits in the pool were devoured by the female dead spirit. This, Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded. Tang Hai was also bewildered. The undead could actually devour the undead? Moreover, they also clearly sensed that after devouring the undead in the pool, the female undead's aura immediately increased. Although the improvement wasn't much, it was still there. In other words, the undead could become stronger by devouring other undead. Did you bring us here just to let us seriously injure this undead and give you a chance to devour it? Tang Hai raised his eyebrows. The undead shook its head. Then why? Tang Hai was suspicious. Qin Feiyong smiled and said, "The reason is under the pool." Under the pool? Tang Hai was stunned. The undead also nodded and gave Qin Feiyong a thumbs up, as if to express its admiration for Qin Feiyong. Tang Hai looked at the pool again and suddenly seemed to think of something. He turned to look at Qin Feiyong and said, "You mean there may also be an ancient site hidden in it?" Qin Feiyong nodded. Tang Hai's spirit was lifted. Qin Feiyong waved his hand, and the divine flame power emerged and poured into the pool. The water in the pool quickly evaporated. After a while, The bottom of the pool appeared in front of the two. The pool could be 50 or 60 meters deep. The bottom was full of mud, emitting a foul smell. A broken skeleton was lying quietly in the mud. The skeleton had obvious traces of decay. It was black and smelled foul. Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai entered the pool and stood above the skeleton. That's not right. Why is this skeleton black? Tang Hai was suspicious. It's poison. This person must have been poisoned when he was alive. After he died, his body decayed, and the poison settled in his bones. Over time, his bones turned black. I think the water in the pond turned black because of this deadly poison. Qin Feiyong said. Could it be that I smelled an unusual stench in the water earlier? It seems like it was emitted by this poison. Tang Hai murmured. Judging from the strength of the undead, this person must have been a war god when he was alive. Even a war god was poisoned to death. What kind of poison is this? It's so terrible. Qin Feiyong murmured. His heart was full of disbelief. A person at the level of a war god had already transcended the mortal world and was in existence above all things. Ordinary poisons could not pose a threat to them at all. Qin Feiyong turned his head to look at the female undead, wanting to get an answer from the female undead. But the female undead turned a blind eye to it. From the time they met until now, he had not seen her say a word. This made Qin Feiyong wonder if creatures like the undead could not speak. Seeing that the female undead did not respond for a long time, Qin Feiyong had to give up helplessly. Tang Hai walked around the skeleton for a while, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Immediately, he stretched out his arm, and his 5 fingers were like eagle claws, grabbing the air. Whoosh! Immediately, something covered in mud flew out of the mud. What's that? Qin Feiyong was curious. Tang Hai waved his hand again, and the mud was removed. A square iron box suddenly appeared in front of the two. Iron box. Qin Feiyong was slightly taken aback and was about to reach out to open the iron box. Don't move, Tang Hai hurriedly said. What's wrong? Qin Feiyong quickly retracted his arm and looked at him in surprise. There are also a lot of toxins on the surface of this iron black. You can't touch it with your hands. After Tang Hai said that, a wisp of divine power rushed towards the iron black. Then, with a slight movement of his fingers, the iron box opened with a clang. The moment Tai He opened the door, a majestic surge of energy surged out. This? Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai looked at each other. This energy was exactly the same as the energy emitted by the gray crystal. The two of them hurriedly lowered their heads to take a look, and their expressions immediately froze. Inside the iron black, there were actually 3 gray crystals. Whether it was the size or the color, they were the same as the gray crystal obtained in the ancient city. Qin Feiyong came back to his senses, turned to look at the undead, and asked, You brought us here for these crystals? The undead nodded. Qin Feiyong frowned and said, Since you can understand what I'm saying, why don't you speak? Could it be that you were a mute when you were alive? The undead shook his head. If you're not a mute, then say something. This way, we can communicate better. Qin Feiyong said. The undead shook his head again. Qin Feiyong had a helpless look on his face. He really couldn't figure out what the undead was trying to say. While Qin Feiyong was asking the undead, Tang Hai also took out 3 gray crystals from the iron black. After confirming that these 3 crystals were not contaminated by toxins, he handed them to Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong carefully put them away and looked at Tang Hai with a smile. Including the one from before, we already have 4, but it's far from enough. Yes. Tang Hai nodded. Although the energy contained in the gray crystals was extremely huge, 4 of them were not enough for Qin Feiyong to break through to the war god realm. Tang Hai pondered for a while, then looked at the undead and said, Do you know where there are more of these crystals? The undead nodded. Tang Hai and Qin Feiyong looked at each other with a hint of joy in their eyes. Tang Hai urged, Take us there at once. Ahem. Qin Feiyong coughed and looked at Tang Hai. Old Tang, the undead also have dignity. When you ask her for help, you should be more polite. Tang Hai rolled his eyes and snorted coldly. If it weren't for the fact that she still has some value, I would have killed her long ago. The corner of Qin Feiyong's mouth twitched. Couldn't he be more euphemistic? He looked at the undead, cupped his hands and smiled. Miss, I'm sorry, my friend's character is like this. Please don't take offense. Miss. Tang Hai was taken aback. He looked at Qin Feiyong with eyes full of contempt. The undead waved her hand to Qin Feiyong, rushed out of the pool without saying a word, and continued to rush forward. Keep up. Seeing this, Qin Feiyong hurriedly said to Tang Hai. Tang Hai rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyong, then waved his hand, rolled up Qin Feiyong, and chased after the undead. Qin Feiyong wondered. Did I annoy you? Why do you always roll your eyes at me? Don't you think it's against your will to call her miss? Tang Hai said. Against my will? Qin Feiyong was stunned and puzzled. Isn't this basic courtesy? What do you mean by against your will? Okay. Then let's discuss it. Let's not talk about whether she is an undead or not. Just by her age, you can imagine that she must be an old monster who has lived for who knows how many years. And in order to get more crystal stones, you actually called her miss. Aren't you ashamed? The contempt in Tang Hai's eyes was even stronger. When Qin Feiyong heard this, he looked quite embarrassed. What's wrong? You have nothing to say. Hypocrite. Tang Hai snorted coldly. Qin Feiyong smiled. But suddenly, he turned his head and looked at Tang Hai strangely. Tang Hai didn't feel anything at first, but after a long time, he felt uncomfortable all over. He frowned and said, Why are you looking at me like that? I remember when I first met you, you were a man of few words. I even thought you were a mute. Why are you so talkative now? Qin Feiyong said. Tang Hai was taken aback, and his expression immediately became indifferent. He coldly snorted and said, I just don't like your way of doing things, so I said a few more words. Ahem. Anyway, you are my subordinate now. Pay attention to your words. Qin Feiyong said angrily. Tang Hai rolled his eyes at him again. Why don't I have any prestige at all? Qin Feiyong was quite helpless. In fact, in the beginning, Tang Hai was still very afraid of Qin Feiyong. However, after getting along with him for a few days, he slowly found that this person was quite easygoing. At least, he was not so serious and harsh to the people around him. So. Chapter 1706. Next, under the guidance of the undead, Qin Feiyong found 5 more ancient ruins one after another. Among them, there were a total of 26 gray crystal stones. Plus the original 4, there were 30 in total. In addition, he also obtained 2 divine artifacts. The 2 divine artifacts were both battle swords. But their level was not high, and they could be considered the most ordinary divine artifacts. As for medicinal pills, medicinal herbs, gold coins, and other treasures, there were naturally countless of them. In the blink of an eye, 5 days passed. Fire Python is not lying. This ancient world is really a place full of opportunities. Qin Feiyong said with a smile as he stood in the air above a mountain ridge and scanned the boundless earth. But don't you think it's strange? Why did the undead bring us to find these ancient ruins? Tang Hai glanced at the undead next to him and transmitted his voice. Maybe it's because she wants to devour other undead. Qin Feiyong thought for a while and secretly said. The 5 ancient ruins that they found these days basically all had undead, and in the end, they were all devoured by this female undead. Her aura was also getting stronger and stronger. I don't think it's that simple. She devoured those undead. It should just be an illusion to paralyze us. Tang Hai said. Illusion? Qin Feiyong was taken aback and curiously asked, Then tell me, what is her real purpose? How would I know? Tang Hai glared at him angrily and then fell silent. Qin Feiyong smiled and looked at the undead. Miss, let's continue. But the undead stared ahead motionlessly. Dozens of miles ahead, there was an endless mountain range. Layers upon layers of mountains. Extremely steep. Some of the peaks were even more than 10,000 feet high, towering into the sky. What are you looking at? Qin Feiyong and Tang Hai looked up at the mountain range suspiciously. Suddenly, Tang Hai's eyes became extremely sharp and he shouted, Who's hiding over there? Get out! There's someone? Qin Feiyong was surprised. He didn't notice at all. It seemed that the strength of the person in the dark was not simple. Whoosh! Not long after Tang Hai finished speaking, 2 figures flew out from a mountain stream and entered Qin Feiyong's line of sight, accompanied by the sound of something breaking through the air. There really is someone. Qin Feiyong was shocked. But then, His expression froze as he looked at one of them and said in surprise, "It's you." That was an elder dressed in black clothes, holding a walking stick. His hair was white. That was right. It was the black-clothed old man who had appeared in the ancient city a few days ago. "That's right, it's me." The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyong from afar and replied coldly. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed with a cold light. He glanced at the person beside the old man in black, and his pupils suddenly contracted. It was a middle-aged man. He was 7 feet tall. He was wearing a fitting black robe. His eyes were deep. His facial features were sharp, and there were strands of white hair at his temples. His expression was rather chilly, and he gave off an indifferent feeling that kept others 1,000 miles away. And it was this person who gave Qin Feiyong a great sense of uneasiness. Tang Hai said, "His aura feels a little familiar." Familiar? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Sensing the middle-aged man's aura, his eyes trembled slightly. It was really familiar. Where had he seen it before? Tang Hai suddenly said, "I remember, it's the murderous intent hidden in the young man's soul." That's right. Qin Feiyong also suddenly realized. At that time, the murderous intent that emerged from the young man's soul was exactly the same as the aura of this person. It meant the owner of the murderous intent was this person. The middle-aged man looked at Qin Feiyong, and a smile gradually appeared on his cold face. He said, "You are indeed an extraordinary young man." What's going on? Qin Feiyong was surprised. This person didn't seem to have any malicious intent. The middle-aged man said, "Little brother, may I know your name?" Qin Feiyong took a deep breath and said, "My name is Qin Feiyong." Qin Feiyong, Qin Batian, the middle-aged man pondered for a while and said with a smile, "So, you are really the descendant of Qin Batian?" "Yes." Qin Feiyong nodded. The middle-aged man looked excited. Qin Feiyong was surprised again. What was this man excited about? The middle-aged man flashed and teleported toward Qin Feiyong and the others. Tang Hai's face changed slightly, and he quickly stood in front of Qin Feiyong and shouted, "Stop, don't come near us." The middle-aged man was stunned and stopped in the void hundreds of feet away. He looked at Tang Hai apologetically and said with a smile, "I was impulsive, I hope brother can forgive me." Tang Hai said in a low voice, "What do you want?" This man's behavior was too abnormal. Logically speaking, when the young man and the black-clothed old man suffered losses in their hands, this man should be looking for trouble. But at this moment, this man was polite, as if he had met a benefactor. As the saying goes, there must be a demon when things are abnormal. Facing this man, he must not be careless. Looking at Tang Hai's vigilant look, the middle-aged man quickly said, "Brother, don't be nervous, I have no ill intentions." "Is that so?" Tang Hai sneered. The middle-aged man nodded and said with a smile, "Let me introduce myself first. My surname is Gua, and my name is Zixiong. This is Gua's second uncle, Guada." Gua Zixiong, Guada, Qin Feiyong murmured. He had never heard of these two names before. But judging from the seniority of the two, this Gua Zixiong should be the young man's father. Gua Zixiong looked at Qin Feiyong and said with a smile, "The reason why I came to you is that I have to confirm your identity in person." "Confirm my identity?" Qin Feiyong frowned. "Yes. You probably don't know, in fact, Qin Batian and I are very good friends." Gua Zixiong said. "What? You are a friend of my ancestor?" Qin Feiyong was stunned. "So Brother Batian is your ancestor. This is really a case of the Dragon King's temple being washed away by the flood." Gua Zixiong laughed loudly. "What's going on?" Qin Feiyong asked. Gua Zixiong seemed to be lost in his memories and was silent for a long time. After a long time he sighed. "Your ancestor is not only my friend, but also my benefactor." Benefactor? Qin Feiyong was stunned. This was really unexpected. "Yes. Back then, I was surrounded by enemies and was about to die. In the end, your ancestor appeared and saved me from danger. Ever since then, your ancestor and I would often gather together and drink to our heart's content. Over time the two of us became close friends. And we also had an agreement." Gua Zixiong said. "What agreement?" Qin Feiyong was puzzled. Gua Zixiong said, "If one day, the descendants of the Qin clan enter the ancient world, if my Gua clan is still around, and if I give birth to a son or a daughter, our two clans will be united by marriage. United by marriage? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Wasn't a marriage alliance a marriage? Tang Hai was also stunned. He looked at Gua Zixiong and asked, "Do you have a daughter now?" Gua Zixiong said with a smile, "I have a daughter more than 5,000 years ago." What the hell? More than 5,000 years ago. The corner of Qin Feiyong's mouth twitched fiercely. At this age, she could be his ancestor. Tang Hai was also extremely speechless. He turned to look at Qin Feiyong, cupped his hands, and said with a smile, "Congratulations, young master. Congratulations on having a fiancé." No, it's a fiancé." A row of black lines appeared on Qin Feiyong's forehead. He glared at Tang Hai and looked at Gua Zixiong saying, "You have no proof." "I can't believe you." Gua Zixiong said, "Who said I have no proof?" Qin Feiyong was surprised. Gua Zixiong took out a long brocade box from his cosmos bag and said, "There is a marriage contract in here, written by your ancestor himself. It also has my and your ancestor's signatures." What the hell? There's even a marriage contract. Qin Feiyong was stunned. He looked at Tang Hai and said, "Go and get it. I'll verify it." "Yes." Tang Hai responded respectfully and walked to Gua Zixiong. Gua Zixiong did not hesitate and directly handed the brocade box to Tang Hai. Tang Hai held the brocade box and went back to Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong opened the brocade box. There was indeed a piece of paper in it, folded neatly. "Ancestor, you're not joking with me, are you?" Qin Feiyong murmured, took out the paper, and slowly unfolded it. What entered his sight was the words, "Marriage Contract." Below, there were rows of small words. The content was similar to what Gua Zixiong had said before. It was roughly, "Today, I have made a promise with Brother Zixiong. If the descendants of the Qin clan enter the ancient world, regardless of whether they are men or women, as long as the Gua clan still exists, I will marry the Gua clan's descendants. This promise will be valid for life. My descendants will abide by it." This, Qin Feiyong was stunned. Tang Hai leaned over and looked at it carefully. Then he transmitted his voice. "Young master, is this your ancestor's handwriting?" "Yes." Qin Feiyong nodded. Although he had never seen his ancestor, there were still many paintings of his ancestor in the library of the imperial palace. He had seen all of these paintings before. Thus, he was able to tell with a single glance that these paintings were indeed written by his ancestor. He looked at the paper and the ink on it. The paper had been specially treated and could be preserved for 10,000 years. As for the ink on it, it did not look like it was just written. Was this marriage contract real? Although the handwriting was his ancestor's, he still did not want to believe it. This was too absurd. His ancestor was such a wise person. How could he leave such a marriage contract in the ancient world? Moreover, he could not even be sure if his ancestor had been to the ancient world. Gua Zixiong smiled and said, "Little brother, I know it's hard for you to accept now, but this is the truth." Qin Feiyong frowned, put the marriage contract back into the brocade box, and asked Tang Hai to return it to Gua Zixiong. Gua Zixiong also immediately put it away. "To tell you the truth, although there is this marriage contract, I always thought that it would not be true. Because ordinary people can't enter the ancient world at all. But what I never expected was that after 10,000 years, you actually barged in, and even let Jiren's second uncle meet you by accident. Say, isn't this fate?" Gua Zixiong smiled with relief. This fate came too suddenly. Qin Feiyong muttered. Tang Hai secretly asked, "Young master, what should we do?" "I must obey the ancestor's will, but..." Qin Feiyong frowned. Chapter 1707. Wait. Qin Feiyong suddenly frowned. He seemed to have missed something. He thought carefully for a moment, and his eyes trembled slightly. He looked at Gua Zixiong and asked, "You just said that this marriage contract has existed for 10,000 years?" "Yes." Gua Zixiong nodded. Qin Feiyong said, "In other words, my ancestor appeared in the ancient world when the miracle opened last time?" Gua Zixiong thought for a moment and said, "According to the time, it seems to be after the miracle closed." "After the miracle closed?" Qin Feiyong looked at Tang Hai and said, I remember the fire python clearly said that when my ancestor entered the miracle for the second time, he was directly forced to the third floor by the fire dragon. How could he appear in the ancient world? How would I know? Tang Hai said secretly. What is going on? Qin Feiyong was full of doubts. Little brother, do you think this is okay? It will be difficult for you to accept this marriage contract now. Why don't you come back with me first? As for the marriage contract, we can discuss it later, Guo Zixiong suggested. This? Qin Feiyong hesitated for a moment, turned to look at Guo De, and asked, do you know about the existence of this marriage contract? Yes. Why? Guo De looked at Qin Feiyong in confusion. Qin Feiyong said, why didn't you tell me when we met in the ancient city a few days ago? Guo De suddenly understood and said with a hoarse smile, although I saw the purple gold dragon blood at that time, I couldn't confirm your identity, so I didn't mention it. What he said was reasonable and there was no flaw in it. Qin Feiyong was silent for a moment, then shook his head and said, this is too sudden. I really don't know whether to believe you or not. Understandable. Guo Zixiong nodded and smiled. Guo De took out a gray crystal from his arms and asked with a smile, little brother, have you been looking for this crystal these days? Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded and said in surprise, you have it too? Of course. This crystal is called a soul stone. It's a great help in condensing divine sense. My Guo clan has a large amount of soul stones. If you return with us, I guarantee that you will get a lot. Guo De smiled. How much is a lot? Qin Feiyong's heart moved as he asked. Guo De said, it's a number you can't imagine. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed as he said calmly, if that's the case, why don't you give me some now? This? Guo De hesitated. Little brother, you might not know this, but this soul stone is quite rare in the ancient realm. However, since little brother wants it, there's no harm in me giving you some now. Take it as my sincerity. Guo Zixiong smiled, took out a Chenkuan bag and threw it to Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong hastily grabbed the Chenkuan bag and lowered his head to check it. Immediately, a look of shock crept onto his face. There were no less than 500 soul stones in this Chenkuan bag. This was truly an unexpected gain. He raised his head and looked at Guo Zixiong and Yi Zichen. One had to be wary of others. But from beginning to end, he didn't find any trace of deceit in their expressions. Sigh. What's going on? Ancestor, can you give me a hint? Qin Feiyong sighed secretly. Little brother, there's no time to lose. Let's hurry back. I think my daughter would also like to meet you, her future husband. Guo Zixiong stepped aside and stretched out his hand with a smile. Tang Hai said calmly, young master, be careful of any tricks. Qin Feiyong was hesitant. Qin Feiyong. But at this moment, an anxious roar could be heard. Qin Feiyong was stunned. This seemed to be the voice of the golden leopard? Why did it come here? Qin Feiyong hurriedly looked up and saw a golden stream of light streaking across the sky like lightning and landing in front of Qin Feiyong. Who else could it be but the golden leopard? It was panting and its eyes were full of anxiety. Qin Feiyong suddenly had an uneasy premonition and asked, what happened? Something big has happened. Old Zhao is in danger. The golden divine leopard gasped for breath. What? Qin Feiyong's body trembled. Come with me quickly. After the golden leopard finished speaking, it turned around and began to return the way it came. Qin Feiyong's face darkened slightly. Looking at Guo Zixiong and Yi Zichen, he cupped his hands and said, I'm sorry, I have something urgent to deal with. I'll visit again when I have time. After that, Qin Feiyong looked at Tang Hai and urged, hurry up and follow the leopard. Tang Hai waved his hand, rolled up Qin Feiyong, and immediately chased after the golden leopard. The undead also immediately turned around and chased after Qin Feiyong and the others. You don't know how to appreciate favors. Looking at the backs of Qin Feiyong and the others, Guo De snorted coldly and turned to Guo Zixiong, asking, Patriarch, what do we do now? Guo Zixiong's eyes flashed and he said in a low voice, let's follow and take a look. Swish. Guo Zixiong waved his hand and the two disappeared without a trace. Junior Leopard, what happened? Back to Qin Feiyong. After catching up with the golden leopard, he immediately asked. That day, after leaving the Black Tortoise realm, I immediately rushed to meet up with old Zhao as you said. But on the second day after we met up, Mu Tianyang suddenly brought people out and even revived that bloodblade. Although old Zhao broke through to the war god realm, he was suppressed by that bloodblade. The golden leopard said. Tang Hai said angrily, "What about you? Why didn't you help him?" "Who said I didn't help him? But that bloodblade was too terrifying. In just one exchange, I was seriously injured." Old Zhao saw that the situation was not good, so he secretly told me to come find you. He tried his best to delay Mu Tianyang. The golden leopard said. Then how did you find us? Qin Feiyang asked. One had to know. Before the golden leopard left, he didn't say where he was going. The golden leopard said, "It's all thanks to it that I was able to find you." Huh. Qin Feiyang was suspicious. With a clang, the divine phoenix blade flew out of the golden leopard's body. Divine phoenix blade. Qin Feiyang was surprised. The divine phoenix blade absorbed your purple gold dragon blood and purple gold dragon chi, so it can sense your location. These days it has been guiding me. The golden leopard said. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang nodded his head in realization, but his expression suddenly changed, and said, "I gave the divine phoenix blade to old Zhao for him to protect himself, but you took the divine phoenix blade away, then wouldn't he have no chance of winning against Mu Tianyang?" "It wasn't me who wanted to take it away. It was old Zhao who asked me to. Because he knew that even if he kept the divine phoenix blade, he wouldn't be able to defeat Mu Tianyang. It's even possible that it would be destroyed by the blood blade." The golden leopard said. It would be a pity if a divine artifact that has given birth to a spirit artifact was destroyed. At this time, a familiar voice was heard. Qin Feiyang was startled. He turned his head and saw Guazixiong beside him. "What are you doing?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "Your ancestor and I are as close as brothers. You are his descendant, which means you are my descendant. If you are in trouble, how can I just stand by and watch?" Guazixiong laughed. Qin Feiyang was hesitant. Tang Hai sent a sound transmission. "Young master, this Guazixiong's strength is unfathomable, maybe he can really help us." Hearing that, Qin Feiyang looked at Guazixiong and laughed. "Thank you, senior." Guazixiong said, "Calling me senior is too polite if you don't mind, just call me Uncle Gua." Qin Feiyang was startled, and nodded. "All right, but Uncle can't always call me little brother in the future, it's really messing up the seniority." "That makes sense. Then from now on, I'll call you nephew." Guazixiong laughed. "Nephew?" Qin Feiyang was speechless. This was still messing up the seniority. The title of nephew was usually used by two parents who had a good relationship with their juniors. For example, if Guazixiong had a good relationship with his father, then it was natural for Guazixiong to call him nephew. But one had to know. Now the people who had a good relationship with Guazixiong were not his father's generation, but his ancestors, who were several generations away. Logically speaking, in front of Guazixiong, he should still call him ancestor. This relationship was really complicated. Guazixiong seemed to see Qin Feiyang's depression, and laughed. "We are us, it doesn't matter if it's your ancestors, you don't have to worry so much." "Uncle is right." Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Guazixiong said, "Your speed is too slow, we'll take you there, where is it?" Qin Feiyang exhaled, threw away the distracting thoughts, put away the divine phoenix blade, and said, "The entrance of the ancient world." "Entrance?" Guazixiong and Guide looked at each other, raised their eyebrows unnoticeably, and then Guazixiong led a group of people and disappeared into the sky like lightning. From the entrance to here, Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai took 7 or 8 days. But Guazixiong only took half a day to return to the entrance of the ancient world with a group of people. One could only imagine how strong Guazixiong's cultivation was. However, at this moment, there was only a lonely stone door at the entrance. There was not a single person in sight. The ground around the stone door was in ruins. Many bottomless abysses covered the land within a radius of tens of thousands of miles like a spider web. In the air, there were even faint fluctuations of battle. Guazixiong looked around and frowned. There was indeed an exciting battle here, but it has already ended. Then he looked at Qin Feiyang and sighed. "I'm afraid that your subordinate is doomed." "Damn it!" Qin Feiyang clenched his hands and blamed himself. "It's my fault, I shouldn't have let old Zhao stay here alone." "Young master." But before he could finish, A joyful cry came from a chasm not far away. Qin Feiyong hurriedly looked up and saw a figure rushing out of the abyss. Who else could it be but Zhao Tai. Qin Feiyong hurriedly ran over, grabbed Zhao Tai's shoulder, and said in surprise, "You didn't die?" "I almost died. If I hadn't run away quickly, you would have seen a corpse now." Zhao Tai sighed with lingering fear, and then knelt down in front of Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong was taken aback and frowned. "What are you doing?" Zhao Tai lowered his head and said, "It's my incompetence that I couldn't stop Mu Tianyang. Young master, please punish me." "Why should I punish you? This is my fault. I know that Mu Tianyang has a blood blade, but I still let you guard here. This is simply sending you to your death. You should blame me. Get up quickly as long as you're fine." Qin Feiyong bent over and helped Zhao Tai up. "Young master," Zhao Tai murmured. Qin Feiyong waved his hand and said with a smile, Okay, don't be like a woman and be shy." Zhao Tai smiled in relief. Chapter 1708. Zhao Tai said, "They have already left the ancient realm." "Left the ancient realm?" Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. "That's not right. Aren't they also entangled by the devil's mark? How would they dare to leave?" Tang Hai said, "Wang Yuanshan and the people from the Nether Hall are indeed entangled by the devil's mark, but Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing are not." Zhao Tai said in a low voice. "That's right. It hasn't even been half a year since the python took them out of the Black Tortoise realm." Qin Feiyong nodded. Tang Hai looked at Zhao Tai and asked, "Do you mean that only Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing have left the ancient realm and the others are still here?" "No. Originally, Mu Tianyang had planned to leave the others here. However, upon taking into consideration that we were still in the ancient realm, they did not dare to stay. Thus, they also left the ancient realm with Mu Tianyang." Zhao Tai said, "Aren't they courting death?" Tang Hai was shocked. "It's no different from courting death. However, although they are entangled by the devil's mark, they can still stay outside for 3 months. I believe young master knows this as well." Zhao Tai said, "I know. Back then, I met the willow tree at the miracle site and he told me all this." Qin Feiyong said. The golden leopard snorted. "Although they can stay for 3 months, once the 3 months are up, they will definitely die. The others are not important. What's important is Mu Tianyang. His divine soul is about to condense. Once it appears, he will have the strength of a god of war. If we don't hurry to find him, when he enters the 2nd level, my cousin and the rest will definitely be killed." Qin Feiyong said in a low voice. Lu Jijin, Old Qin, the mysterious lady and the master of the Dragon Phoenix House, Yi Shu, were all on the 2nd level. Therefore, he couldn't sit back and do nothing. Although he wanted to continue to stay in the ancient realm and investigate the matter of his ancestors, he had to prioritize everything. At present, dealing with Mu Tianyang was the most important thing. "Uncle, this is an emergency. I have to leave the ancient realm first. We'll meet again." Qin Feiyong turned to Guazixiong and cupped his hands. Then he waved his hand and led Zhao Tai and the others toward the stone door without looking back. Seeing this, the undead immediately followed. By the time Guazixiong reacted, the group of humans and the undead had already entered the stone door. "This?" Guada was stunned. He turned to Guazixiong and asked, "What should we do?" Guazixiong's eyes were also rather gloomy. Guada looked at the stone door again. Qin Feiyong and the others had already disappeared. He said angrily, "I really can't accept this. I actually let him leave just like that. There's nothing we can do about it. It's our fault for not being able to enter the divine ruins. However, don't worry. This Qin Feiyong will definitely come to the ancient world again." Guazixiong took a deep breath and said, "How so?" Guada was taken aback and looked at him suspiciously. "Although I haven't known him for long, I can see that Qin Batian is very important to him." Guazixiong sneered. "You mean, after he finishes his business outside, he will come in again to inquire about Qin Batian?" Guada asked. "Yes." Guazixiong nodded and said, "Let's go back first and then send someone to guard here. As soon as he appears, we will be able to know his whereabouts immediately." Guada said,
Then this old man will guard here personally.
I don't trust anyone else. This? Guazixiong hesitated and nodded.
All right, then I'll have to trouble second uncle.
As long as we can complete our great cause, it's worth it.
Guada smiled.
Definitely. Guazixiong clenched his hands, and his deep eyes flashed with a determined light. Divine ruins. In the sky above a barren mountain.
Qin Feiyong and the others descended out of thin air.
This place is completely different from the place where we first entered the ancient world. It seems that the ancient world has indeed been drifting aimlessly. Qin Feiyong scanned the mountains below and said. Zhao Tailai smiled and said, to be honest, the ancient world is really a very magical place. Qin Feiyong nodded. Suddenly,
he noticed the undead at the side and asked in surprise, "Why did you follow us out?"
Tang Hai and Shin Bao's eyes were also full of shock. They actually didn't notice that this guy had followed them out. It is? Zhao Tailai was surprised. Previously at the entrance, he had seen the undead, but at that time, he didn't pay attention to it carefully. Qin Feiyong said, she is the undead we met in the ancient world. Undead? Zhao Tailai was shocked, and his divine might suddenly erupted. Don't be nervous. She doesn't seem to have any malicious intentions towards us. Qin Feiyong waved his hand. Zhao Tailai was stunned and asked suspiciously, then why is she following us? I don't know. Qin Feiyong shook his head and looked at the undead for a moment. Seeing that the undead didn't answer him, he gave up helplessly. Tang Hai glanced at the undead, looked at Qin Feiyong, and suddenly said, young master, you just ran out like this, what about your fiancé? What? Fiancé? Zhao Tailai and the golden leopard looked at each other and looked at Qin Feiyong in surprise. Qin Feiyong glared at Tang Hai, looked at Zhao Tailai and the golden leopard, and said with a smile, don't listen to his nonsense, where did I get a fiancé? Tang Hai said indifferently, there is even a marriage contract, and you still don't admit it? I say, can you keep your mouth shut? Qin Feiyong was quite annoyed. He didn't expect this cold guy to be so gossipy. Old Tang, what's going on? We have only been separated for a few days. How did the young master get a fiancé?
And the two people who came with you before, who are they? Zhao Tailai ran to Tang Hai's side and asked in a low voice. Those two people are even scarier. That middle-aged man is called Guazixiong, the future father-in-law of the young master. His cultivation is at least at the Deshang stage. And that old man is called Guade, a war god at the small Cheng stage, and the future second grandfather of our young master. Tang Hai said. Deshang stage, small Cheng stage. Zhao Tailai and the divine leopard looked at each other. This was too scary. However, they still didn't understand, why did Qin Feiyong suddenly have a fiancé? It's like this. Tang Hai glanced at Qin Feiyong and whispered to Zhao Tailai and the divine leopard. Boring. Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes at the two men and one beast, turned his head to look in the direction of the ancient world, and there was a trace of doubt between his brows. Why didn't Guazixiong and Guada come out? Could it be they couldn't leave the ancient world? Then he looked up at the sky again, and the doubt between his brows became even stronger. It had been so long, why didn't he see the power of rule force appear? Moreover, at this moment, they were standing in the void. One had to know. On the first floor of this miracle, even space divine objects couldn't fly. Could it be that the fire python gave them special privileges? No. When they separated, the fire python didn't know about the existence of the golden divine leopard and Tang Hai. Not to mention this undead. In other words, even if it gave special privileges, it would be given to him and Zhao Tailai, and would never give it to Tang Hai, the divine leopard, and the undead. Then there was only one reason. The fire python was nearby. Qin Feiyong retracted his gaze, scanned the surroundings and smiled. Brother Fire, long time no see, how have you been? And Tang Hai, Zhao Tailai, and the divine leopard, upon hearing Qin Feiyong's words, couldn't help but look stunned. Who was he talking to? Haha. Accompanied by a hearty laugh, the shadow of a huge beast shot out from a mountain stream below at lightning speed. When it appeared in front of Qin Feiyong, who else could it be but the fire python? Greetings, Lord Guardian. Zhao Tailai hurriedly bowed. Shen Bao and Tang Hai's expressions were also extremely respectful. No need to be so polite.
The fire python smiled. Its attitude was very easygoing. Looking at Qin Feiyong, it shook its head and said helplessly, I originally wanted to give you a surprise, but before this emperor appeared, I was already discovered by you. It's really boring. Qin Feiyong couldn't help but laugh. The fire python asked, how was the trip to the ancient realm? Qin Feiyong sighed, just as Brother Fire said, the ancient realm is full of opportunities. The fire python nodded, its expression becoming serious, and said, actually, this emperor has been waiting for you here. Waiting for me? Qin Feiyong was surprised. That's right. 3 days ago, this emperor suddenly sensed that someone had activated the power of the rules on the first level, so I immediately rushed over to check. In the end, I found that it was a group of humans. According to this emperor's interrogation, they are Mu Tianyong's group that you are looking for. The fire python said.
Qin Feiyong asked, then where are they now?
They are on the 2nd level.
It was Lord Beast God who brought them to the 2nd level.
Lord Beast God also helped the people of the Heavenly Sun Empire and the Nether Hall remove the demon mark.
The fire python said.
What? Why did it do that? Isn't it breaking the rules?
Qin Feiyong said angrily.
Rules?
Most of the rules of this miracle were set by Lord Beast God.
Do you think these rules are useful to it? The fire python sneered. Qin Feiyong fell silent. This emperor also asked Lord Beast God why it did this.
Do you know what its answer was?
The fire python's expression was full of helplessness. What's its answer?
Qin Feiyong frowned.
It said that you have removed the demon mark. If those people are still bound by the demon mark, then this show is not worth watching.
The fire python said.
Show. Qin Feiyong suddenly burned with anger. Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai were also indignant. The fire python glanced at the 3 of them and sighed. This emperor knows that you are very uncomfortable now, but in the eyes of Lord Beast God, this is just a game.
It has such strength, so I dare not say anything.
However, the removal of the demon imprint was obtained through my own efforts. Is it fair for it to do this? Qin Feiyong said angrily. The fire python said, fairness is built on the foundation of great strength.
Sigh.
Qin Feiyong sighed deeply and said, Brother Fire, how can I not know this? But in my heart, I feel a little uncomfortable. All right. Although Lord Beast God's method is unfair, isn't this emperor secretly helping you? Chapter 1709.
Thank you, Brother Fire.
Qin Feiyong cupped his hands and thanked him, but suddenly raised his eyebrows and said, Brother Fire, what did you say? Secretly help me?
Yes.
The Beast God has already learned of the relationship between this emperor and you, and strictly forbade this emperor from being involved with you. Fire Dragon sighed. This bastard small beast. Qin Feiyong gritted his teeth and asked, where is the Fire Dragon now? This emperor doesn't know. Since the Beast God let it enter the 3rd floor, it has never appeared again. Regarding this, Lord Beast God was also vague about it. Fire Python said. Qin Feiyong frowned and said, it can't be shielding the fire dragon, right? This emperor also thought so, but thinking back, even if the Beast God is shielding it, what can this emperor do? Fire Python sighed, his expression full of helplessness. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed coldly, looking at Fire Python, and said word by word, don't worry, small beast won't kill it, I will help you kill it. This? Fire Python looked at Qin Feiyong in a daze. Although I am not small beast's opponent now, I am confident that I will be able to trample it under my feet in the future. Qin Feiyong said. Fire Python's expression suddenly changed, and he whispered, don't say this again in the future. If the Beast God finds out, even this emperor can't protect you. Qin Feiyong smiled and said, I know what to do, don't worry. As long as you know what to do. Fire Python nodded and asked with a smile, do you have any plans now? Qin Feiyong said, of course, to the 2nd floor. To deal with Mu Tianyong? Fire Python asked. Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded. Fire Python looked at him deeply and said, well, this emperor will take you in now. Wait. Qin Feiyong hurriedly said. What? The Fire Python was suspicious. Qin Feiyong asked, there are humans in the ancient realm, do you know? There are humans? The fire python was slightly taken aback.
It shook its head and said, "This emperor really doesn't know."
Are they strong?
Very strong.
I met two people. One is a war god of small completion stage. The other is a war god of Dashang stage.
Qin Feiyong said solemnly.
What?
The fire python was shocked.
A war god at the Dashang stage is rare even on the second level of the miracle. Only the beast emperors of the various territories have such strength. Qin Feiyong said, "Then do you know if there are any other entrances to the ancient realm?" Other entrances? The fire python was stunned. Qin Feiyong said, "For example, is there a passage to the ancient realm on the third level?" The third floor. The fire python pondered for a while and shook its head. "You also know that this emperor has just become a guardian not long ago, and is not very clear about many places in the miracle. However, if what you said is true, then this emperor needs to make a trip to the ancient realm." "You want to go to the ancient realm?" Qin Feiyong said. The fire python smiled. "Such a magical place. If there is a chance, I will definitely go and take a look." Qin Feiyong said, "Then if you find anything, remember to tell me." "What do you want to know?" The fire python was suspicious. Qin Feiyong said, "To tell you the truth, there are people in the ancient realm who know about the existence of my ancestor." "How is this possible? Didn't your ancestor enter the third level?" The fire python said. "That's why I asked you if there is an entrance to the ancient realm on the third level. If there is, then everything makes sense. But if there isn't, then I really don't understand. How did my ancestor enter the ancient realm?" Qin Feiyong said. "I see." The fire python suddenly understood. Qin Feiyong pointed to the undead and said, "Also, help me send her back to the ancient realm." Hearing this, the undead immediately shook her head at Qin Feiyong, as if saying, "Don't send her back." The fire python looked at the undead. Qin Feiyong said, "She is the undead of the ancient realm. I don't know why she came out with me." "The undead of the ancient realm," the fire python murmured. Seeing the undead shaking her head desperately, it smiled and said, "Since she followed you, there must be a reason. Why don't you keep her by your side? Maybe at a critical moment, she can help you." Hearing this, the undead immediately nodded to Qin Feiyong, as if to say, "I can help you." "This?" Qin Feiyong frowned and looked at the undead, hesitating. Suddenly, the undead ran to Qin Feiyong and grabbed Qin Feiyong's arm as if she was acting coquettishly. The fire python teased, "Brother Qin, it seems that your charm is not bad. Even the undead likes you." Qin Feiyong smiled helplessly and looked at the undead. Okay, you can follow me for the time being, but I have to say the ugly words first. Don't hurt anyone around me, or don't blame me for being ruthless." The undead nodded repeatedly. "This undead is very interesting. And looking at her form, she must have been a woman when she was alive. Brother Qin's luck with women is not bad." The fire python laughed. "Brother Fire, why do you like to joke so much?" Qin Feiyong was speechless. Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Is there anything else to do? If not, this emperor will send you to the second floor." The fire python said. "Boss, let the fire python find Fengling Er and Zhao Shuang. Fatso's voice suddenly sounded in Qin Feiyong's mind. "Yeah, I actually forgot about them. Wait. There seems to be another acquaintance. It's..." Yes, it's Tan Wu." Qin Feiyong hurriedly looked at the fire python and said, "Help me check if these three people are still on the first floor." Qin Feiyong waved his hand, and the shadows of Tan Wu and the other two condensed. Okay. The fire python closed its eyes, and its perception was infinitely magnified. Everything in the entire miracle was revealed in its eyes. A moment later, it opened its eyes and looked at Qin Feiyong, saying, "The man was found, and there was a hell god hound by his side, but the two women, this emperor did not find them." "You didn't find them?" Qin Feiyong's heart suddenly sank. Could it be that something had happened to Zhao Shuang and Fengling Er? Inside the castle, Fatty's face was filled with bewilderment. Lu Hong said, "Fatso, quickly ask Feiyong, did he show the fire python their previous appearances or their current appearances?" "Before. Now." Fatso was puzzled. "Don't forget, their current identities are Zhao Yu and Feng Ranran. In the miracle, they will definitely maintain their current appearances like Ling Yunfei and Luo Qingzhu. Lu Hong said. Yes, they must have changed their appearances now. Fatso suddenly realized and immediately transmitted his voice to Qin Feiyong. When Qin Feiyong heard this, he also suddenly realized. He condensed the changed appearances of Zhao Shuang'er and Luo Qingzhu, and said to the fire python, "Then look again, can you find them?" The fire python closed its eyes again. Soon, it opened its eyes and looked at Qin Feiyong with a smile. "There are them, they are together, and now they seem to be cultivating in a water source." Qin Feiyong breathed a sigh of relief and asked, "What about the man?" "His situation is not very good," the fire python said. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyong's heart tightened. "See for yourself." After the fire python finished speaking, the void in front of it distorted, and a picture quickly emerged. "Little scum, it's all your fault. I said from the beginning that we should go around and not provoke them, but you insisted on barging in. Let me tell you, if anything happens to this emperor will definitely not let you off." Immediately, as soon as the picture appeared, a voice like a shrew's cursing in the street echoed in the void. Qin Feiyong's face twitched. This voice was too familiar. As soon as he heard it, he knew that it was the cursing voice of the hellhound. And the little scum in the mouth of the hellhound was Tan Wu. It really hasn't changed at all. Even the rhythm of cursing is the same as before. Qin Feiyong shook his head helplessly and raised his head to look at the picture. He saw the hellhound and Tan Wu fighting a bloody battle on a plain. Surrounding them was a group of black centipedes. Densely packed. Limitless. But that was not an ordinary centipede. It was a type of extremely poisonous, huge, and extremely ferocious blood-colored centipede. Some of them were even more than 10 meters long. Below their abdomens, 2 rows of tentacles were like steel blades, glowing with astonishing sharpness. The strongest one's cultivation had even reached the peak realm. From afar, Tan Wu and the hellhound's surroundings were like waves of blood-colored waves surging. The number was too large, and it was impossible to count. As for Tan Wu and the hellhound, their cultivation was not low either. They had both reached 8-star War Emperor. But at this moment, they were in an extremely sorry state. Not only were their bodies riddled with wounds, their lips and faces were also black. Obviously, they had all been poisoned. "Oh my God, I've already killed for a day and a night. When will it end? Tan Wu, you bastard. If you want to kill me, I won't let you have an easy time." The hellhound cursed angrily. "Can you shut up? If I wanted to kill you, why would I follow you in?" Tan Wu said angrily. The hellhound roared. "Are you crazy? Otherwise, why would you run in?" Zhao Tailai looked at the man and beast and asked suspiciously, "Young master, what's the situation between them?" "They are enemies." Qin Feiyong shook his head helplessly. Zhao Tailai said, "You mean this hellhound is his spiritual pet?" "Not a spiritual pet, a partner," Qin Feiyong said. "Then what are they arguing about? I thought they were opponents." Zhao Tailai was speechless. "Just get used to it," Qin Feiyong said. Anyway, every time they met Tan Wu and the hellhound, they were basically bickering endlessly. This way of getting along is really strange. Zhao Tailai shook his head. Qin Feiyong looked at the fire python and said with a smile, "Brother Fire, let's go over and take a look." "Okay." The fire python nodded. An invisible force emerged, and a group of people immediately descended in the sky above the plain. On the plain, corpses were everywhere. Fresh blood dyed the ground red. A pungent smell of blood assailed their nostrils. Qin Feiyong and the group scanned the plain. Even with their current strength and cultivation, they couldn't help but admire Tan Wu and the hellhound. The ground was full of blood centipede corpses. These corpses were all combat emperors. There were even many who had reached 9-star combat emperor. As for Tan Wu and the hellhound, relying on the cultivation of 8-star combat emperor, not only did they fight here for a day and a night, but they also killed so many blood centipedes. Their methods were really amazing. Chapter 17:10. I'll go and help them. The Golden Divine Leopard chuckled. "Don't." Qin Feiyong waved his hand. "What's wrong? Aren't they your friends?" The Golden Divine Leopard was stunned.
It's because they're my friends that I know them well. This little difficulty won't be a problem for them.
Especially this Tan Wu. In some aspects, he's stronger than me. Qin Feiyong smiled. Is that so?
The Golden Divine Leopard expressed its doubts. Tan Wu and the Hell Divine Hound were fully focused on fighting the bloody centipedes and didn't notice Qin Feiyong and the others in the sky. The Hell Divine Hound took a detoxification pill and crushed a bloody centipede with one foot, saying, "Little scum, if this goes on, we'll all be finished."
Tan Wu also smashed a bloody centipede with a punch and then took a detoxification pill.
He nodded and said, "You're right. If this goes on, you and I will be finished." A man and a beast looked at each other. The next moment, they each took out a pill and threw it into their mouths.
What? Qin Feiyong's gaze suddenly trembled.
Zhao Tai, Tang Hai, the Golden Divine Leopard, and the Fire Python were also in disbelief. Although Tan Wu and the Hell Divine Hound only took a moment from taking out the pills to taking them, they could clearly see that the two pills were surrounded by dragon-shaped pill chi.
Dragon-shaped pill chi.
In this world, only divine pills could give birth to dragon-shaped pill chi. In other words, Tan Wu and the Hell Divine Hound had taken two divine pills.
Young master, am I seeing things?
Zhao Tai said.
No.
Qin Feiyong shook his head. No. But how is this possible? Even Tang Hai and I have never seen divine pills. How could the two of them have them?
Zhao Tai said in disbelief.
Qin Feiyong pondered for a while and said, "I think it should be that old man who gave it to them."
That old man?
Zhao Tai and Tang Hai were stunned and looked at Qin Feiyong suspiciously, asking, "Which old man?" The Fire Python was also very curious. Qin Feiyong shook his head and said, "You wouldn't know even if I told you."
Boom! Before he finished speaking,
Tan Wu and the Hell God Hound's aura suddenly soared. This, Zhao Tai and the others were shocked. Qin Feiyong said, what they consumed before was the 5 Elements Universe pill.
So it's this kind of pill. Zhao Tai suddenly understood. Qin Feiyong was stunned.
He turned to look at Zhao Tai and asked in surprise, "You know about it too?"
Yes.
We know about this elixir because of the Heavenly Sun Empire.
Zhao Tai said.
Heavenly Sun Empire.
Qin Feiyong murmured.
That's right. I remember that during the last divine miracle, someone from the Tianyang Empire entered the Black Tortoise world and presented a manual called the Pill Mantra to the Emperor of the Tianyang Empire. There are many unheard of pill recipes recorded in this manual. However, our Vanga League and Fengtian Palace also received the news immediately. Because at that time, both of our forces had spies lurking around the Emperor. When we learned about this, we were also very shocked and wanted to take the pill mantra for ourselves.
A bloody storm is about to begin.
However, in the end, it was a situation where both sides suffered. The pill mantra was also destroyed in our battle.
Zhao Tai said.
Qin Feiyong asked, "Do the people of the Tianyang Empire know about these pill recipes?"
They don't know either.
Because our Vanga League and Fengtian Palace will not allow the Tianyang Empire to control these pill recipes. After all, these pills are too heaven-defying. If we let the Tianyang Empire continue to develop like this, it will inevitably threaten us. So, our two superforces joined forces to eliminate all the people of the Tianyang Empire who entered the Black Tortoise world. Moreover, we used the puppet technique to read the memories of the Emperor and the Divine Overlords. After confirming that they didn't know about the pill recipes, we let them go.
Zhao Tai said.
If even you don't know about the existence of the pill mantra, then how did Mu Tianyang obtain this pill mantra?
When did he obtain it? Qin Feiyong frowned.
The pill mantra had always been a mystery. He wanted to find out, but he didn't know where to start. Zhao Tai said in surprise, "You're saying that the pill mantra belongs to Mu Tianyang?"
Yes.
But the original is now in my hands.
Qin Feiyong said.
It's in your hands. Zhao Tai and Tang Hai looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. As the Nether Hall's Hallmaster, Tang Hai also knew about this. Both of them didn't expect that the original pill mantra that all forces fought over was in Qin Feiyong's hands. The Fire Python suddenly said, "Brother Qin, can you let me take a look at the pill mantra?"
Sure.
Qin Feiyong nodded and entered the ancient castle to take out the pill mantra. The Fire Python looked at it for a while and said with a smile, Brother Qin, you're so lucky. This was written by the creator himself.
The creator wrote it? Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai's eyes trembled.
Yes.
Look, this is the name of the creator.
The fire python erected the pill mantra. The two of them raised their heads and looked. On the cover of the pill mantra, there was indeed the word, skyless. Qin Feiyang asked, then does Brother Hua know why this pill mantra fell into Mu Tianyong's hands? The fire python shook its head and said, I don't know. I've never seen this thing before. Maybe my father knows, but... Speaking of which... A trace of grief immediately crept up on the fire python's face. Qin Feiyang hurriedly said, I'm sorry, I reminded you of something sad.
It's okay.
The fire python smiled and returned the pill mantra to Qin Feiyang, exhorting, You must treasure this thing well. After all, it belongs to the creator.
Maybe in the future, it will be of great help to you.
All right. Qin Feiyang nodded and returned to the castle with the pill mantra, placing it in the iron box of the 6-word divine arts. Hiding here was safer than anywhere else. Because even Chang Shui couldn't break this iron box. When he appeared outside again, Tan Wu and the Hell Godhound's cultivation had already broken through to the 9-star War Emperor. The man and the beast were in high spirits. The Hell Godhound shouted, Little slag, let's compete and see who kills more. Don't always call me little slag, little slag.
How am I worse than you?
In the past, your cultivation was so much higher than mine. Now that I've caught up to you, you're the little slag. Tan Wu snorted coldly.
TSK.
If it weren't for old Master Qin helping you, would you be able to catch up to this emperor? I said you're a little slag, but you still don't admit it. The Hell Godhound's 6 heads and 12 eyes were filled with disdain.
Cut the crap.
If you want to compete, then compete.
Do you think I'm afraid of you?
Tan Wu was furious. Boom. An ancient peak the size of a palm appeared. Its entire body was black and emitted a strong black light. Following closely, an obscure power surged out in all directions like an avalanche. The surrounding blood-colored centipedes immediately slowed down.
What is this?
The golden divine leopard said in shock.
His innate ability.
This innate ability is called the gravity domain. Anyone who enters the domain will have their speed suppressed. Back then, under this gravity domain, I also suffered a lot. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. The past surfaced in his mind like a tide. He also didn't expect that the former enemy would actually become friends. As soon as the gravity domain began, Tan Wu was like a god descending, killing in all directions. Even the blood centipedes at the peak of the 9-star War Emperor realm had no power to resist in front of him. Qin Feiyang watched for a while, then turned to look at the fire python and said with a smile, The outcome has been decided.
Let's go.
Go. Not bringing them along. The fire python was stunned. I understand Tan Wu. He is a person with ambition and pride. Even if I want to take him away, he won't follow me. Let's go take a look at those 2 women. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. The fire python nodded and brought Qin Feiyang and the group of people to the sky above an oasis without making a sound. Below, the mountains and rivers were beautiful, and the scenery was pleasant. In front of a lake, 2 women sat cross-legged, their long hair dancing in the wind. Although their appearances were very ordinary, their temperaments were extremely outstanding. Of course, this was just a fake face. Their true appearances were all heavenly beauties. Because they were Fengling Er and Zhao Shuang Er. The golden divine leopard muttered, Their cultivation has already reached the peak of the 9-star War Emperor realm. Is there still a need to cultivate? They are already comprehending the profound meaning of becoming a god. Qin Feiyang said. Zhao Tailai frowned and said, Comprehending here seems to be a little dangerous. The fire python suddenly said, Wait, there's another person here.
There's another person?
Qin Feiyang and the others were surprised and asked, Where? The fire python brought Qin Feiyang and the others and quietly appeared above a mountain peak, saying, He's down there. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and scanned the mountain peak. Suddenly, his gaze locked onto a big tree by the cliff. Beside the big tree stood a young man in black. How is this possible? Why is he at the miracle site? When he saw the face of the young man in black,
Qin Feiyong's face was immediately filled with surprise and doubt. The young man in black was about 1.9 meters tall and his body was quite strong. The black robe on his body was very fitting, and his thick black hair was casually draped over his shoulders, filled with a wild aura. The lake where Zhao Xueqi and the young man in black were not far from the giant peak where the young man in black was. At this moment, the young man in black lowered his head without saying a word. Looking at Zhao Xueqi and the young man in black, his dark eyes flickered with wisps of light. Look at his eyes, they are a little unfriendly. Young master, do you know him? Zhao Tailai transmitted his voice. Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded, his brows tightly knitted together. Who is it? Zhao Tailai asked. Qin Feiyong lowered his head and said, he can be considered an opponent and also a friend. An opponent and also a friend? Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai looked at each other. Why did it sound so contradictory? Why is he at the miracle site? I remember that when I entered the miracle site, I didn't see him. Qin Feiyong muttered to himself with a puzzled expression. Chapter 17:11. Then who exactly is he? Seeing Qin Feiyong's incredulous face, Zhao Tailai and the others were even more surprised. His surname is Dong Zhengyang. Qin Feiyong said. That's right. The black-clothed youth was Dong Zhengyang. He was naturally very familiar with Dong Zhengyang. How long had it been? He had actually broken through to the peak of the 9-star combat emperor realm. It was also unbelievable. What had Dong Zhengyang experienced in these few years? Whoosh! Suddenly, Dong Zhengyang rushed down the mountain. His aura was restrained to the extreme, like a ghost walking in the night. What does he want to do? Zhao Tailai was suspicious. But then, his face changed and he transmitted his voice. Young master, he seems to be going for the two women. Qin Feiyong looked at Dong Zhengyang, then looked at Zhao Xueqi and the other person by the lake, and could not help but frown. What did Dong Zhengyang want to do? Whoosh! Tang Hai suddenly rushed toward Dong Zhengyang without saying a word, and his eyes flashed with a shocking cold light. Qin Feiyong was stunned and hurriedly transmitted his voice. Don't hurt him. Got it. Tang Hai did not even turn his head as he responded. Let's go and take a look. Qin Feiyong said to Zhao Tailai, and rushed toward the lake. Zhao Tailai, Fire Python, and the Golden Divine Leopard looked at each other and quickly followed. Very quickly. Dong Zhengyang lurked near Zhao Xueqi and the other person, hiding behind a bush, watching the two of them. As for Dong Zhengyang, who was hiding in the dark, Zhao Xueqi and the other person were completely unaware. These two women are really careless, daring to cultivate in seclusion in such a place. Qin Feiyong was quite annoyed. The water source was a miracle. It could be said to be heaven, but it was also hell. Because in such a place, there were all kinds of hidden dangers. Crash! All of a sudden, Dong Zhengyang activated his fighting soul. A pitch-black iron chain appeared. It was as thick as an arm, and it was like a viper as it rushed towards Zhao Xueqi and her companion. Not good. Qin Feiyong's heart sank. What is it? Zhao Tailai looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyong said in a low voice, his fighting soul can freeze people in the void. Fixed in the void? Zhao Tailai was stunned. That's right. As long as they are bound by the iron chains, Zhao Xueqi and her brother will not be able to move. They will be like fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Qin Feiyong said. So scary? Zhao Tailai was surprised and asked, are we going to save them? Wait a moment. Qin Feiyong waved his hand. I've been waiting for you. Before he finished speaking, Zhao Xueqi and the other man suddenly opened their eyes. Their gazes swept directly toward Dong Zhengyang, their eyes flashing with intense cold light. Are they deliberately waiting for Dong Zhengyang? What's the situation? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Clang! Accompanied by an ear-piercing metal sound, a pocket-sized sword swept out from behind Zhao Xueqi. It was crystal clear, like a crystal, exuding a hazy luster. This seems to be her fighting soul, the heart of the divine sword. Qin Feiyong muttered. Innate magical ability. Sword domain. Zhao Xueqi shouted again. The pocket-sized sword suddenly trembled, blooming with a brilliant light. Following closely, Strands of sword chi emerged and shot out in all directions. In just a moment, a sword chi boundary of thousands of feet appeared out of nowhere. You guys are really difficult to deal with. Dong Zhengyang frowned. You know that we are difficult to deal with, but you still linger around? Zhao Xueqi snorted coldly. Inside the boundary, countless battle swords appeared. Each battle sword was 3 feet long, 3 fingers wide, and seemed to be cast from cold iron, exuding a world-destroying sharpness. In the blink of an eye, Dong Zhengyang's fighting soul rushed into the boundary. Clang! Seeing this, Zhao Xueqi waved her jade-like hand. The battle swords in the boundary suddenly swarmed forward. Accompanied by a loud clang, the iron chain was cut into pieces in a short while. It felt that those battle swords were like a meat grinder. Anything that entered the boundary would be smashed into pieces. With his fighting soul destroyed, Dong Zhengyang's body trembled slightly. A trace of blood immediately overflowed from the corner of his mouth, and his face was a little pale. Did you see that? You are not our opponent at all, Zhao Xueqi said proudly. Fengling Air stood aside and did not make a move from beginning to end. Looking at Dong Zhengyang on the opposite side, there was a hint of ridicule on her face. Qin Feiyang looked at Zhao Xueqi and murmured, "This little girl, she used to be a little playful. How did she become so tough now?" Zhao Xueqi was the first person he met in Iron Ox Town besides Lin Yi. Therefore, he was very clear about Zhao Xueqi's character. Not to say that she was gentle and lovely, but she could also be said to be a beautiful woman. But now, he could only see a barbaric force in her. This is not right. I am not your opponent, Dong Zhengyang murmured, looking at Zhao Xueqi and Fengling Air. His eyes gradually became dead silent. Boom! All of a sudden, a terrifying aura rushed out of his body. What? As soon as this aura appeared, not only Qin Feiyang, but even Zhao Tailai and the others also changed their expressions. Because this was the aura of a beast. It seemed that in Dong Zhengyang's body, there was a terrifying beast sleeping. At this moment, Dong Zhengyang was awakening it. The aura was getting stronger and stronger. Zhao Xueqi and Fengling Air looked at Dong Zhengyang, and their expressions gradually became dignified. Roar! After about a few breaths, Dong Zhengyang raised his head and let out a roar. It was really like a beast roaring. At this moment, his whole body was also filled with an amazing murderous aura. Following closely, an even more amazing scene appeared. They saw that Dong Zhengyang's body was crazily growing bigger. The clothes on his body were torn to pieces. His muscles were bulging high. In less than 3 breaths, he became a giant of more than 10 meters tall. The terrifying aura, with him as the center, rolled in all directions. The entire water source was razed to the ground in an instant. What the hell is this? Zhao Xueqi and Fengling Air looked at each other, and their faces were a little pale. Not your opponent? I don't know where you guys got the courage to say such disdainful words to me. Dong Zhengyang roared, his black hair fluttering. His fist, which was as big as a millstone, smashed toward Zhao Xueqi and Fengling Air. Sacred Sword Judgment. Zhao Xueqi snorted coldly, and her battle aura surged. A battle sword appeared and slashed on Dong Zhengyang's fist. Crack! However, in an instant, the battle sword shattered. Zhao Xueqi's delicate body trembled, and blood gushed from the corner of her mouth. So strong? Qin Feiyang was shocked. One had to know. The sacred sword judgment that Zhao Xueqi evolved was also a perfect battle art, but it was actually shattered by Dong Zhengyang's punch? Black demon body, invincible demon body, destroy it for me. Dong Zhengyang roared again, and a fist smashed toward the two. The terrifying power even distorted the void. Don't be arrogant, one sword to break the soul. Zhao Xueqi was not convinced, and a light flashed across the sky, tearing the earth. Dong Zhengyang's eyes were full of disdain, and he directly punched out. The light instantly collapsed, without any resistance. How is this possible? Zhao Xueqi was dumbfounded. His black demon body is a divine art. Fengling Air suddenly said. Divine art? Zhao Xueqi's eyes trembled. Let me experience how terrifying your black demon body is. Fengling Air stepped out, and her body suddenly emitted lightning. That's right. That was the lightning. Golden in color. The wisps of golden lightning flashed on her body, exuding a destructive aura. Even her eyes had turned golden, and at this moment, they were also bursting with lightning. Then, her 5 fingers suddenly clenched, raised her arm, and punched Dong Zhengyang's fist. Her body did not change. So her fist was the same size as an ordinary person. Under Dong Zhengyang's millstone-sized fist, her fist was as small as an ant. However, when the 2 fists, one big and one small, met, the 2 were actually forced back a few steps at the same time, showing a situation of being evenly matched. This meant that the strength of Feng Ling Er's fist was not inferior to Dong Zhengyang's at all. Sister, amazing! Zhao Xueqi ran to Feng Ling Er's side and giggled. Feng Ling Er smiled proudly and said, "Of course I can't let you steal all the limelight alone. Luodan, Feng Ranran, when I was in the temple, why didn't I realize that you were so outstanding?" Dong Zhengyang opened his mouth. His voice was like a bell, deafening. "That's because we keep a low profile." Zhao Xueqi raised her head, like a proud little princess. Zhao Tailai was stunned, looked at Qin Feiyang, and transmitted his voice. "Young master, they knew each other before?" "Yes. We all entered the temple together. However, Dong Zhengyang probably doesn't know their true identities yet." Qin Feiyang said. "Keep a low profile?" Dong Zhengyang raised his head and laughed. "What are you laughing at?" Zhao Xueqi was dissatisfied. Dong Zhengyang stopped laughing, looked down at the 2 of them and said, "Your strength is indeed very strong, but what?" Feng Ling Er raised her eyebrows. "Body of the heavenly devil." Dong Zhengyang did not answer. With a roar, a bloody aura gushed out of his body like a tide. His long hair and eyes were instantly blood-red. His aura was even more shocking. Boom! Without saying a word, he threw a punch at the 2 of them again. Feng Ling Er did not shrink back. She took a step forward, and golden lightning shattered the earth. Boom! 2 fists, one big and one small, collided once again. Puff! Feng Ling Er immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Like a meteorite, she smashed into the ground behind her. Her whole body suddenly seemed to fall apart, and her face was pale. Zhao Xueqi was dumbfounded. This strength was too frightening, wasn't it? "If you only have this strength, then this is the end." Dong Zhengyang laughed. His blood-red hair danced behind him, as if a peerless heavenly devil had descended, and his murderous aura was monstrous. "This guy is getting more and more terrifying. I'm really looking forward to the battle with him," Qin Feiyang muttered. Zhao Tailai was stunned and asked doubtfully, "Which battle?" "Because of certain reasons, there will be a battle between him and me sooner or later." Qin Feiyang smiled. "I see." Zhao Tailai suddenly understood and said to himself, "Although his strength is indeed not bad, compared to you, there is still a big gap. There is no suspense about his crushing defeat. Time will slowly change everything. How strong will he be in the future? No one can imagine. So it is too early to make a conclusion now. It's time to stop them. Otherwise, someone will definitely die." Chapter 17:12. Looking at Qin Feiyang, who suddenly appeared, the 3 of them were slightly stunned. Qin Feiyang looked up at Dong Zhengyang and said with a smile, "Old friend, long time no see." "It's really you?" Dong Zhengyang looked at Qin Feiyang, whose body was constantly shrinking, and his bloody eyes and bloody hair gradually returned to normal. "Yes, it's me." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Why are you here?" Dong Zhengyang took out a shirt, put it on, and asked suspiciously. "I just happened to pass by. I didn't expect to meet you," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Dong Zhengyang was stunned and shook his head. "I don't think there would be such a coincidence." "All right. I admit, I've been here for a long time, but I didn't show up," Qin Feiyang said. Dong Zhengyang nodded, and his pupils suddenly shrank. He looked at Qin Feiyang for a moment and said in surprise, "Your cultivation?" "That's right. I've already broken through to the pseudo-god realm." Qin Feiyang nodded. "So fast?" Dong Zhengyang was stunned. "This guy has already broken through to the pseudo-god realm?" Zhao Xueqi and Feng Ling Er were also shocked. Feng Ling Er said, "Be careful, don't reveal any flaws and let him find out our identities." "I know." Zhao Shuang nodded without a trace. After Dong Zhengyang came back to his senses, he looked at Qin Feiyong and said, "Let me test your strength." Boom. As soon as he finished, he took a step forward, his battle chi rolling out, and punched towards Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong smiled, raised his arm, stretched out his index finger, and gently pressed the tip of his finger on Dong Zhengyang's fist. At that moment, Dong Zhengyang's arm stopped in midair. No matter how much force he exerted, he could not advance even half an inch. He felt that Qin Feiyong's fingertips were like an insurmountable mountain in front of his fist. Dong Zhengyang decisively retracted his arm and said with a smile, "The strength of a fake god is indeed terrifying. Your current strength is also not bad. However, there's something I can't figure out. How did you enter the divine sight? I didn't see you at that time." Qin Feiyong was suspicious. Dong Zhengyang sighed. "It's a long story. I entered the divine sight by following the imperial preceptor." Mingling with the imperial tutor? Qin Feiyong was surprised. "Yes. I killed a law enforcer from the law enforcement hall and disguised myself as that law enforcer to sneak in." Dong Zhengyang said. "I see." Qin Feiyong came to a sudden realization and said with a smile, "It's rare for us to meet. Shall we get together?" When Dong Zhengyang heard this, he fell silent. "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. "There's still time in the future. Let's meet again in the future. For now you step aside. I'm going to deal with the two of them." Dong Zhengyang pointed at Fengling Air and Dong Zhengyang, murderous intent surging in his eyes. Qin Feiyong turned his head to look at the two of them. He looked at Dong Zhengyang and asked in confusion, "Back in the 9 underworlds, they fought side by side with us. They could be considered as old friends. Why did you kill them?" Dong Zhengyang did not answer, and the murderous intent in his eyes was even stronger than before. "Brother Dong, what's going on?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. Dong Zhengyang's eyes flickered. Suddenly, he turned around and left without saying a word. Qin Feiyong was stunned. What was going on? "Qin Feiyong, there are many things that I can't tell you now. But there's one thing you have to remember. When you face me in the future, you must be careful." Dong Zhengyang said without looking back. Then, he sped up and disappeared from Qin Feiyong's sight like lightning. "Be careful." What does that mean? Qin Feiyong frowned. Dong Zhengyang's behavior today seemed a little abnormal. At this moment, Zhao Shuang and Feng Linger looked at each other, then turned around and sneaked away. "Stop." Qin Feiyong turned around and looked at the two of them. The two of them froze. "Where are you going?" Qin Feiyong looked at the two of them playfully. The two of them turned around and looked at Qin Feiyong. Feng Linger smiled and said, "To even be able to meet here, we're really fated." "Still pretending?" Qin Feiyong was stunned and said jokingly, "Yes, it's a coincidence. Why don't we go together?" No. The two of them quickly waved their hands. "You don't want to see me? Have I done anything wrong to you before?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. No. We just have some private matters to deal with. It's not convenient for us to go with you." The two of them laughed. "I see." Qin Feiyong nodded and said, "Then answer me first. How did you provoke Dong Zhengyang?" "We didn't provoke him," Zhao Shuang said. "You didn't provoke him?" Qin Feiyong was stunned and said suspiciously, "Then why did he want to kill you?" "We don't know. It seems that half a year ago, we met him by accident. We wanted to say that we were old acquaintances and we should go together. But this guy, I don't know what's wrong with him. He actually attacked us. Later, he even chased after us." The two of them said, "You didn't tell the truth. I know Dong Zhengyang. He would never attack you for no reason. There must be a reason." Qin Feiyong frowned and said, "Why don't you believe me?" "I swear to God in the name of my grandfather. If there is half a lie, let God punish me and I will never be reincarnated," Feng Linger said. Qin Feiyong suddenly frowned. This woman dared to swear in the name of her grandfather? Feng Linger's grandfather was Feng Cheng. He took good care of Qin Feiyong in the early years. When Feng Cheng died, Qin Feiyong was sad for a long time. And before Feng Cheng died, he told him to take good care of Feng Linger. And Feng Cheng was Feng Ling Heir's most respected and loved person. Feng Ling Heir swore in the name of Feng Cheng, so what she said was absolutely true. However, what was the reason? He also knew Dong Zhengyang. He was a very upright and admirable opponent. But this time, why did he want to kill Feng Ling Er and Yi Zichen for no reason? Just as Qin Feiyang was pondering, Feng Ling Er wanted to sneak away again. But suddenly, Tang Hai was like a ghost, blocking in front of them. Who is it? The two of them suddenly changed their faces. This was because they could feel an unprecedented sense of danger from Tang Hai. At that moment, they turned and fled in the other direction, but Zhao Tailai appeared in front of them again. The two of them looked at each other and immediately turned and fled in the other direction. Do you think I don't exist? Accompanied by a cackle, the golden divine leopard stood up from a patch of grass. You! The two of them turned pale. Even though Tang Hai, Zhao Tailai, and the golden leopard were concealing their auras, they were still divine gods of battle and false god realm. Their gazes alone were enough to make Feng Linger and Qin Nen feel despair. Zhao Tailai rolled his eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang, saying, Young master, Menger's death has always been a pain in the subordinate's heart. Why don't you bestow them to the subordinate and let them give birth to a son or daughter for the subordinate? Old bastard, you're shameless. When Zhao Xuanga heard this, her beautiful face suddenly turned pale. Qin Feiyang was also slightly stunned. When he saw Zhao Tailai's slightly playful eyes, he smiled and nodded. Yes, but what? Zhao Tailai was suspicious. Qin Feiyang looked at Zhao Xuanga and Zhao Tailai, frowning and said, The two of them are so ugly. What if they give birth to an ugly monster? Yes. I really didn't think of this. Zhao Tailai said. Qin Feiyang, you bastard. We fought side by side. How can you treat us like this? Are you still human? Besides, how are we ugly? Zhao Xuanga and Zhao Tailai gnashed their teeth and cursed. Qin Feiyang said, Usually, ugly people won't admit it. You. The two of them were so angry that they trembled. Zhao Tailai said, Although a little ugly, it's okay. I don't mind. We don't mind you, okay? The two of them hurriedly said. You don't mind me? Zhao Tailai pointed at his nose with a face of disbelief. Cough cough. You too, although old Zhao is a little old, he's more than enough for you too. Qin Feiyang coughed dryly. Young master is right. I am a war god. The two of you marrying me is a blessing that you can't cultivate for several lifetimes. Zhao Tailai said proudly. War god. Zhao Xuanga and Zhao Tailai looked at each other, their eyes full of surprise. That's right. I am a war god. I am the real deal. Zhao Tailai said. This. The two of them couldn't speak clearly. Why does this bastard have a war god beside him? And he even called him young master. Tang Hai suddenly said, Since old Zhao likes it, then let's cut the crap. It's decided happily. Who's decided happily with you? Bastard, you're a war god and a false god, bullying two women like us. What kind of men are you? Zhao Xuanga and Zhao Tailai suddenly became anxious. You're wrong. Not a false god, a war god. It's two war gods, a false god, and a false god beast. Tang Hai said expressionlessly. What? Their eyes widened as they looked at Qin Feiyang and Zhao Tailai. Then, their gazes shifted to the golden leopard and Tang Hai. This emperor is the false god beast, he said. The golden leopard grinned. Tang Hai also said, I'm also another war god. This, what the hell is going on? The two of them were scared silly. Two war gods, a divine beast. When did this Qin Feiyang have so many terrifying guys around him? You two are just peak 9-star war emperors. In front of us, you're not enough, so be obedient. Qin Feiyang laughed. Don't. We. Qin Feiyang, you. The two of them were extremely anxious. Say what you want to say. Qin Feiyang said. We. The two of them stammered. Qin Feiyang was speechless. He had already scared them like this, and they still didn't take the initiative to confess? If that's the case, then let's be a little more ruthless. Qin Feiyang looked at Zhao Tailai and said, Old Zhao, I'll make the decision now. You two get married immediately.
Feng Ling Er suddenly became angry and said angrily, "You bastard, are you looking for a beating?"
Aya, that's quite fierce.
"Old Zhao, can you subdue them?"
Qin Feiyong said. Don't worry, it's just 2 women. What's the big deal? Watch how I make them obedient. Chapter 17:13.
"Don't come over."
Feng Ling Er quickly waved her hand at Zhao Tailai. At the same time, she protected Zhao Xueqi behind her. From this, it could be seen that the two were as close as sisters. And Feng Ling Er was older than Zhao Xueqi. So, she was protecting her younger sister as an elder sister. But Zhao Tailai turned a deaf ear. Feng Ling Er was really anxious. She looked at Qin Feiyong and said angrily, "Bastard, tell him to stop."
"Why?"
Qin Feiyong said lightly. "Because I am Feng Ling Er, and she is Zhao Xueqi." Feng Ling Er could no longer hold back the fear in her heart and reported her true identity. Feng Ling Er?
"Zhao Xueqi."
Qin Feiyong was stunned. He looked at the two and shook his head. Do you think I am an idiot? The 2 of them are long dead. Besides, they are much prettier than the 2 of you. It is really us. Feng Ling Er was anxious.
"Humph. Don't think I am so easy to fool."
Originally, I just wanted you to marry old Zhao, but you actually dared to pretend to be Ling Er and Shuang Er. It is unforgivable. Old Zhao, execute them on the spot. Qin Feiyong shouted.
"Yes."
Zhao Tailai nodded.
Feng Ling Er shouted, "I am not lying to you.
We are really Feng Ling Er and Zhao Xueqi." Feiyong, do you still remember when you were framed by Lin Bailey in Iron Ox Town and were surrounded by Pill Hall, Martial Arts Hall, Lin family, and my Zhang family? Zhao Xueqi also quickly said.
And
Qin Feiyong was stunned. He reached out and said, "Old Zhao, stop first." Zhao Tailai stopped in front of the two. Are you really Feng Ling Er and Zhao Xueqi? Qin Feiyong frowned. Yes. The two nodded. Since you are them, why have you been hiding your identities from me? Besides, I personally witnessed them dying before my eyes. Qin Feiyong said angrily. The 2 of them stuttered. This brat. If this goes on, it will definitely drive them crazy. The fire python, who was hiding in the dark, shook its head and laughed. Speak! Qin Feiyong shouted. We. The 2 of them looked at each other, not knowing how to answer. Alas! Feng Ling Er let out a long sigh. She looked at Zhao Xueqi and said, "Let's restore our true appearances first." Zhao Xueqi nodded. The 2 of them took out a facial restoration pill and threw it into their mouths. A short while later, 2 stunning faces appeared before everyone's eyes. Zhao Xueqi, slim and graceful. Her jet-black hair draped over her shoulders, fluttering in the wind. Her eyes were as clear as a mirror, and she exuded a unique aura. Feng Ling Er had a pair of white legs that were long and slender. Her figure was exquisite, and her waist was small. There was no extra fat. Her skin was as smooth as cream, shiny and beautiful. Is it really you? Qin Feiyong looked at the 2 of them in a daze. But he was sighing in his heart. After not seeing each other for so many years, the 2 naive and ignorant girls had become goddess-like existences. Especially Feng Ling Er. Her figure was excellent. Of course. Zhao Xueqi was also impatient. It was just that some parts were not as exaggerated as Feng Ling Er's. It's us. Zhao Xueqi smiled. You are really not dead. Qin Feiyong had a very excited look on his face. What? Do you really want us to die? Feng Ling Er snorted coldly. No. Qin Feiyong quickly waved his hand. Feng Ling Er roared. Now, do you still want us to marry your subordinate? If you want to marry, I won't stop you. Qin Feiyong smiled. Bastard! Feng Ling Er was furious. She stepped forward and twisted Qin Feiyong's ear, gnashing her teeth and saying, "Is it because I haven't beaten you for a long time that your skin is itchy?" The nature of this tigress was revealed. Qin Feiyong secretly complained. Feng Ling Er had been very rough and barbaric since she was a child. He had suffered a lot in front of this woman before. Seeing this, Zhao Xueqi quickly grabbed Feng Ling Er's wrist and said, "Sister Ling Er, don't be angry. He must be joking." Humph.
If it weren't for Sister Xuanger's face, I would have castrated you today. Feng Ling Er snorted coldly and finally let go of the devil's claws. Qin Feiyong rubbed his ear and muttered, "After so many years, your personality hasn't changed at all. Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to get married?" "What did you say?" Feng Ling Er raised her eyebrows. "Nothing. Nothing." Qin Feiyong quickly waved his hand. Zhao Tailai walked to Qin Feiyong's side, glanced at Feng Ling Er and said, "Young master, even a woman is so afraid of you, you are a little." Don't say it, it's all a shadow left from childhood." Qin Feiyong sighed helplessly. Zhao Tailai was speechless and secretly said, "Then do we still have to confess to them later?" "Confess to what?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. "Of course we already knew their identity. Were we just teasing them?" Zhao Tailai said. "We can't confess, we can't confess. If they know this, I'm afraid even Zhao Xuanger will fall out with me, let alone Feng Ling Er with a fiery temper." Qin Feiyong quickly said. "Then how do you plan to end this?" "You have to know that Ling Yunfei and Luo Qingzhu are cultivating in another castle. When they see Ling Yunfei and Luo Qingzhu, they will immediately know that you are teasing them." Zhao Tailai secretly said. "Ah!" Qin Feiyong was stunned. Seeing this, Zhao Tailai laughed and said, "Is this considered going for wool and coming home shorn?" Qin Feiyong smiled bitterly. Originally, he wanted to tease the two girls, but now he was in an awkward situation. Zhao Xuanger looked at Qin Feiyong and said apologetically, "Sorry we lied to you for so long." "It's okay." Qin Feiyong waved his hand. But he had been thinking about how to end this. "You definitely don't like our young master, so you did it on purpose." Shen Bao smiled sinisterly. "Don't talk nonsense. He is our young master. Even if we don't like him, we can't dislike him." Tang Hai said secretly. "Still not admitting? Old Zhao, say something fair. Did old Tang do it on purpose?" Shen Bao asked telepathically. "This is not important. The important thing is that it is very pleasing to see our young master being abused." Zhao Tailai smiled secretly. "Hee, it is indeed pleasing to the eye." Shen Bao smiled sinisterly. After a mournful wail, Feng Ling Er and Zhao Xuanger finally let go of Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong awkwardly tidied up his clothes and rolled up his sleeves. His arms were full of bruises caused by Feng Ling Er and Zhao Xuanger. The sharp pain made him grimace. He looked at the two women with dissatisfaction and said, "You are too cruel." "Serves you right." Feng Ling Er rolled her eyes and asked, "How did you know our identity?" "Ling Yunfei and Qingzhu told me." Qin Feiyong rubbed his arms and said. Zhao Xuanger said in surprise, "They have met up with you?" "Yes. Not long after entering the divine site, I met them in Kuanping. I was wondering why you hid it from me." Qin Feiyong frowned. Zhao Xuanger said helplessly, "We didn't want to, but this is the old master's order. We can only do it." Qin Feiyong said, "Then the barbaric character you showed before? It was also faked. I was just afraid that if I spent too much time with you, you would notice something." "How is it? I'm good at faking it, right?" Zhao Xuanger smiled playfully. "Very good. However, I still like the original you. In the future, don't be like some tigress. No one dares to marry you." Qin Feiyong glanced at Feng Ling Er and said, "Who are you talking about?" Feng Ling Er immediately frowned. "I didn't name you. Why are you so agitated?" Qin Feiyong snorted coldly. "You?" Feng Ling Er was angry again. "Sister Ling Er, calm down, calm down. We've tortured him enough just now. Don't bother with him." Chapter 17:14. Feng Ling Er stared at Qin Feiyong, her beautiful eyes flashing coldly. The atmosphere at the scene was quite solemn. Seeing that the situation was not good, Qin Feiyong decisively sent the two of them into Ling Yunfei's space divine object. The golden divine leopard joked, "Young master, I didn't expect you to be afraid of someone." "Shut up." Qin Feiyong glared at it angrily, then looked at Tang Hai and snorted coldly, "You'd better not speak again in the future. Just be a mute." "Yes." Tang Hai replied respectfully. Qin Feiyong was speechless.
Why wasn't it so obedient before? Brother Qin, have you forgotten? At this time, the fire python appeared and asked.
Qin Feiyong nodded, thought for a while and said, Brother Fire, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Tan Wu and the Cerberus. Your friends are my friends. I'll tell the griffin not to make things difficult for them. The fire python laughed.
Thank you. Qin Feiyong was grateful. Suddenly, he thought of Dong Zhengyang and said, and Dong Zhengyang, please take care of him too. Dong Zhengyang?
The fire python was slightly stunned and said, I feel that this person is not a good person.
Are you sure you want to help him? I feel that he seems to be hiding something in his heart.
And it's related to me.
Before I figure it out, I don't want him to die. Qin Feiyong said.
Okay.
The fire python nodded. An invisible force surged out. The bodies of Qin Feiyong and the others became light, and they immediately appeared on an ancient plaza. The square was not big, and there was a stone door in the middle. All around, the mountains and rivers were beautiful, and the grass and trees were lush.
The aura of fierce beasts permeated every corner of the earth.
This is the second floor?
Tang Hai and the golden divine leopard looked at all this in surprise.
Yes.
The fire python nodded, looked at Qin Feiyong, and said with a smile, Brother Qin, then we'll meet again.
See you. Qin Feiyong cupped his hands and smiled. Whoosh. The next moment, the fire python disappeared before their eyes.
Zhao Tailai turned to look at Qin Feiyong and asked suspiciously, Young master, why don't you ask Fire Python to help find Mu Tianyong's current location?
And your eldest cousin and the others. Shin Bao added. We can't rely on it too much. Moreover, it knows why we came to the second level. If it doesn't have any concerns, it will definitely help us. Qin Feiyong said. You mean, what is it worried about? Zhao Tailai asked.
When we met it, didn't it say that small beast was not allowed to help us anymore? For it to be able to help us so much on the first floor, it's already very loyal.
As friends, we can't make things difficult for it.
If it angers the small beast, it will be in danger.
Facing a powerful small beast, we can't help it at all. So, if you can avoid bothering it now, try not to. Qin Feiyong said.
Zhao Tailai nodded and said, Young master, you're really thoughtful.
I'm ashamed.
Qin Feiyong smiled faintly as he looked at the golden divine leopard and said, There are countless divine beasts on the second floor. You won't be of much help outside. Go and cultivate in the castle first. Castle. Golden divine leopard's eyes lit up. It hadn't entered the castle before and didn't know if it was as magical as Zhao Tailai said. Qin Feiyong waved his hand and the golden divine beast disappeared instantly.
Zhao Tailai tried to fly and found that he could. If he could fly, could he send messages? He immediately suggested Qin Feiyong to try.
Qin Feiyong also tried to send messages to Lu Jijin, the mysterious lady and old Qin, but there was no response at all.
Obviously.
Although they could fly on the second level, they could still use the image crystal. Zhao Tailai said, Try the portal again?
Qin Feiyong nodded and took out a portal, but it couldn't be opened. It seems that we can only fly here. Zhao Tailai said regretfully.
Qin Feiyong shook his head and said with a smile, It's good enough to be able to fly, but there will be some trouble.
What trouble?
Zhao Tailai looked at him suspiciously.
Space divine object.
We can fly, so can the space divine object.
In this way, it will undoubtedly be more difficult for us to kill Mu Tianyong. Qin Feiyong said. That's true.
Zhao Tailai nodded.
Don't think too much.
Qin Feiyong shook his head and ordered, You guys split up and search the vicinity to see if there are any traces of humans. 3 days later, regardless of whether you find them or not, you all have to come back here and meet me.
Yes.
The two responded respectfully and quickly disappeared from Qin Feiyong's sight, one to the east and the other to the west. Qin Feiyong retracted his gaze, looked at the undead next to him, and said with a smile, Since you are following me, shouldn't you also contribute? The undead glanced around and flew to the north without saying a word.
You have quite a character.
Qin Feiyong shook his head with a smile and followed into the castle. The golden divine leopard wandered around the castle, his eyes full of suspicion. When he saw Qin Feiyong appear, he transmitted his voice. Your castle is so small? He transmitted his voice because he was afraid of disturbing everyone who was in seclusion.
Yes.
Qin Feiyong nodded. It's really hard to imagine that such a small broken place actually has a time formation. The Golden Divine Leopard muttered.
Broken place?
Qin Feiyong was speechless. He had no idea how many people were drooling over his ancient castle, yet this guy was still looking down on it? Boom!
Suddenly,
a terrifying aura burst out from his body. Qin Feiyong was stunned and hurriedly turned his head to look. He saw Lu Zheng's long hair fluttering in the wind, his clothes ragged, and his aura crazily soaring.
I finally broke through,
Qin Feiyong murmured. Boom! The next moment, Lu Zheng's aura rose to the peak state. Haha. Little cousin, how is it? You stepped into the peak state so quickly. Your brother is awesome, right? Lu Zheng also opened his eyes and looked at Qin Feiyong with a smug smile. Tisk! Qin Feiyong is already a pseudo-god. You are just a peak 9-star combat emperor. What is there to be proud of? Before Qin Feiyong could speak, the Golden Divine Leopard scorned. Ah! Lu Zheng was stunned, looked at the Golden Divine Leopard, and said angrily, Where did this kitten come from?
Kitten?
Kid, do I look like a kitten to you? The Golden Divine Leopard suddenly became angry. Lu Zheng ignored it and looked at Qin Feiyong and said, Where are we now? The second floor. Qin Feiyong said. Then hurry up and find my brother. Lu Zheng said. He was quite worried. I know. Qin Feiyong nodded. Then send me to Ling Yunfei's Space Divine item. I have to step into the immortal state as soon as possible. Otherwise, I will be laughed at by some people who look down on me. Lu Zheng glanced at the Golden Divine Leopard and snorted coldly. Who are you scolding? The Golden Divine Leopard was furious and pounced on Lu Zheng with bared fangs and brandished claws. But before it pounced, Lu Zheng asked Qin Feiyong to send it to Ling Yunfei's castle. The Golden Divine Leopard shouted unhappily, Kid, ask him to come out. Let's fight for 300 rounds. Bang! Qin Feiyong immediately smacked the Golden Divine Leopard's head fiercely. Junior Leopard was in so much pain that it grimaced. Qin Feiyong looked down at the Golden Divine Leopard and frowned. Why do I find that you are not easy to deal with? You only found out now? The Golden Divine Leopard snorted through its nose. You are not ashamed, but proud of it? Qin Feiyong was speechless. He ignored it and took out the axe. The Golden Divine Leopard went up. When it saw that it was a rusty axe, it immediately mocked. Young master, are you crazy? How can you keep a rusty axe like a treasure? Rusty. Qin Feiyong murmured. A sly look flashed in his eyes. He handed the axe to the Golden Divine Leopard and said with a smile, Then do you dare to touch the blade of this broken axe? Why wouldn't I dare? The Golden Divine Leopard smiled disdainfully. It stretched out its claws and pressed against the blade of the axe. In order to prove how awesome it was, it used extra strength. But when it touched the blade of the axe, it realized that something was wrong. It was too late for regrets. Its claws were cut in half. It felt a sharp pain. It hurriedly retracted its claws. It was almost cut off. At that moment, it looked down at the axe, no longer looking down on it. Its eyes were filled with shock. How could a rusty axe be so sharp? How is it? Do you still dare to look down on it? Qin Feiyong looked at the Golden Divine Leopard mockingly. The Golden Divine Leopard glared at Qin Feiyong and said, You deliberately played with me. Didn't you look down on it? Of course I have to let you see its power. Qin Feiyong laughed. Bastard. The Golden Divine Leopard cursed. Some things can't be seen on the surface. Qin Feiyong glanced at it and then looked down at the axe. The axe was still stained with the Golden Divine Leopard's blood. But, just like before, the axe did not absorb the Golden Divine Leopard's blood. The blood dripped down the rust and onto the floor of the ancient castle. And the rust on it did not disappear at all. The Golden Divine Leopard said in a deep voice, This axe is not simple. Did you find it in the ancient world? Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded and took out a dagger, wanting to scrape off the rust on the axe. But he was shocked to find that these rust stains seemed to be fixed on the axe and could not be removed. What's going on? Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and tried all kinds of methods,
but he could not remove the rust on the axe. If Chang Shui was still here, it would definitely be able to remove these rust stains. What a pity! Qin Feiyong shook his head and sighed. Chang Shui had fallen into the hands of small beast. How could he get it back? Temporarily putting away the axe, he took out a Qiankuan bag. It was the Qiankuan bag that Guazixiong gave him.
With a wave of his hand, pieces of soul stones immediately flew out of the Qiankuan bag and piled up on the ground.
After a careful count, there were actually a total of 570 soul stones. In addition to the 30 he found himself, there were a total of 600 soul stones.
What is this?
The golden divine leopard glanced at the soul stones in surprise. Qin Feiyong hurriedly said, "This is called a soul stone. It has the effect of condensing divine sense.
The energy of this soul stone is comparable to hundreds of spirit congealing pills with 5 or 6 veins."
What? Chapter 17:15. Seeing this, Qin Feiyong immediately kicked it. The golden leopard immediately flew out and hit the wall behind it with a bang. It immediately felt dizzy. It got up, shook its head and glared at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong said, "Let me tell you, don't even think about getting a single one of these soul stones." The golden leopard's face immediately changed and its eyes were full of flattery.
"Young master, you see."
Stop, stop, stop. Qin Feiyong hurriedly waved his hand and rubbed his forehead. He looked at Junior Leopard unhappily and said, "At most 50. If he didn't give it to it, it would definitely pester him endlessly." Okay. Thank you, young master. If you need any help in the future, just let me know. I'll definitely do my best." The golden leopard laughed and quickly ran up to grab the 50 soul stones. It was overjoyed. "Don't give me empty promises. Breaking through to the war god realm as soon as possible is the greatest help you can give me," Qin Feiyong said. "Don't worry. I'll definitely cultivate in seclusion seriously."
The golden divine leopard stood up and patted his chest as he vowed solemnly.
Qin Feiyong shook his head helplessly and put away all the soul stones. Then, he sat cross-legged on the ground and took out a soul stone. He held it in his hand and began to refine and absorb it. The majestic energy was like a torrent that flowed through his palm and arm and into his sea of consciousness. Strands of brand new divine consciousness were born immediately. "This energy is indeed amazing," the golden leopard suddenly exclaimed.
Qin Feiyong opened his eyes and turned his head.
He saw the golden leopard sitting cross-legged like a human. That funny look made him want to laugh. Immediately, he calmed down and continued to refine. Time passed by slowly. An hour later,
the soul stone in his hand suddenly shattered.
The energy inside had been completely absorbed by him. The golden leopard also refined the first soul stone. Its eyebrows were full of surprise and it immediately began to refine the second one. Qin Feiyong was deep in thought.
After refining the first soul stone, he finally came to the conclusion that this soul stone would allow him to form 100 strands of divine sense.
This result made him both happy and worried. What made him happy was that he still had 550 soul stones after giving the golden divine leopard 50 soul stones. One could condense 100 strands of divine consciousness. 550 soul stones could condense 55,000 strands of divine consciousness. In other words, as long as he finished refining these soul stones, he would be able to step into the 5th stage of the false god realm.
What worried him the most was that 550 soul stones were far from enough for him to step into the war god realm.
This was because in order to step into the war god realm, one had to condense 100,000 strands of divine sense. In other words,
even if he refined these 550 soul stones, he would still need more than 40,000 strands of divine consciousness, which was almost half of the total.
He could not help but feel a little regretful. Why didn't he ask Guazixiong to get more? He pondered for a moment. Qin Feiyong suddenly raised his head and looked at Willow Tree, Li Jian, Cui Li, the 6 elders, and Yu Huang, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. Willow Tree had said before that he was still at the 2nd stage of the false god realm. These soul stones were not enough for him to directly step into the war god realm. Li Jian had just broken into the false god realm and was only at the 1st stage. It was even more impossible. As for Yu Huang, although he did not say which stage his cultivation was at, according to the Golden Wolf King, he had just broken through, so it was definitely not enough. That left only the 6 elders, Xueqi, and Junior Leopard. That's right. He wanted the person with the highest cultivation to refine these soul stones. Because this way, he could create another war god in the shortest amount of time. Qin Feiyong said, 6 elders, Xueqi, Junior Leopard, tell me, which stage of the false god realm are you at? The golden divine leopard opened his eyes and looked at Qin Feiyong suspiciously, asking, what are you trying to do? The 6 elders and Xueqi also opened their eyes and looked at Qin Feiyong suspiciously. Qin Feiyong glared at Junior Leopard and said angrily, I asked you to speak, so speak. What's with all this nonsense? The golden divine leopard said, my cultivation is at stage 8. Stage 8. Qin Feiyong was shocked. He did not realize that Junior Leopard was so strong. Stage 8 meant that Junior Leopard had already condensed 80,000 strands of divine consciousness. Qin Feiyong asked, how many strands of divine consciousness do you have? More than 88,000 strands. The golden divine leopard said. More than 88,000 strands. Qin Feiyong murmured. In other words, Junior Leopard only needed to refine 120 soul stones to step into the war god realm. This was really an unexpected surprise. What about you guys? Qin Feiyong looked at Xueqi and the 6 elders. One of the elders said, the 6 of us are between stage 2 and stage 4. Not enough. Qin Feiyong shook his head and looked at Xueqi. Xueqi said, I'm at stage 6. I have 64,000 strands of divine consciousness. Stage 6? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Then, a trace of joy appeared on his face. 64,000 strands of divine consciousness. In other words, Xueqi still needed 36,000 strands of divine consciousness. In other words, Xueqi only needed to refine 360 soul stones to step into the war god realm. He had a total of 600 soul stones in his hands, including the one he had refined before. Xueqi had 360 soul stones and Junior Leopard had 120 soul stones. In total, he only had 480 soul stones. In other words, even if he gave them to Xueqi and Junior Leopard, he would still have more than 100 left. He could actually create 2 war gods? This was a result that he never expected. Qin Feiyong was pleasantly surprised. But suddenly, he frowned slightly. Would the soul stone's effect become weaker and weaker as he refined it? Qin Feiyong looked at Junior Leopard and asked, how much divine consciousness did you condense after refining the first soul stone? A total of 100 strands. In the past, it would take me at least half a year to condense a strand of divine consciousness. But now, in this short period of time, I condensed 100 strands. The energy of this soul stone is really beyond my imagination. Junior Leopard said, extremely excited. 100 strands. Same as me. The effect of the soul stone did not weaken. Qin Feiyong muttered and decisively took out another 70 soul stones and threw them to Junior Leopard. What do you mean? The golden divine leopard was stunned. Qin Feiyong said. Nonsense, of course it's for you to break through the war god realm. This. The golden divine leopard was stunned. What was going on? Previously, he didn't even want to give it 1 soul stone. Now, he actually gave it 70 at once? Was his head kicked by a donkey? But here, there were many beasts, but no donkeys. Qin Feiyong counted 360 soul stones and gave them to Xueqi. Xueqi also froze on the spot. He never thought that Qin Feiyong would actually give him soul stones. The 6 elders and Li Jian also looked at each other. What was going on? Although they had been cultivating, they had already heard the conversation between Qin Feiyong and Junior Leopard from the beginning. At that time, they also thought of asking Qin Feiyong for some soul stones to cultivate. But then again, soul stones were so precious. Qin Feiyong probably wouldn't give them to them. Moreover, it was also because of Qin Feiyong that they were able to break free from the shackles of the evil devil's mark and once again step on the path of cultivation. So they were too embarrassed to ask Qin Feiyong. But unexpectedly, now, Qin Feiyong actually took out a large number of soul stones and gave them to Xueqi and Junior Leopard. He himself only had a little more than 100 left. Young master, what are you doing? These soul stones can only be found by chance. How would I dare to take them? You should keep them for yourself to refine. Xueqi came back to his senses and quickly looked at Qin Feiyong. Idiot. Don't you understand young master's good intentions? Willow Tree suddenly opened his eyes, looked at Xueqi and Junior Leopard, and snorted coldly. Xueqi and Junior Leopard looked at Willow Tree in confusion. Why didn't young master give me, Yu Huang, Li Jian, and the 6 elders the soul stones, but only the 2 of you? This is because the 2 of you can use the energy of the soul stones to break through to the war god level. And me, Yu Huang, Li Jian, and the 6 elders don't have enough cultivation. Even if we refine all the soul stones, we won't be able to step into the war god level. In short, young master gave the soul stones to the 2 of you because he wants you to step into the war god level first. Willow Tree said. So it's like this. Xueqi and Junior Leopard finally understood. Xueqi stood up and bowed. Young master, thank you for your trust in me. I will work hard and strive to step into the war god level as soon as possible. This, Junior Leopard hesitated and also looked at Qin Feiyong. I won't say any flattering words. I will only say one thing. I would rather betray the world than betray you. I didn't expect that a beast like you could say something so profound. Willow Tree looked at Junior Leopard in surprise. Betray the world than betray you. The meaning of these words was very obvious. It would rather betray everyone in the world than betray Qin Feiyong. It could be said that no words could express loyalty better than these words. Of course. And Junior Leopard's determination. It was swearing, declaring that it would truly submit to Qin Feiyong and integrate into this small team. Subsequently, Xueqi and Junior Leopard began to concentrate on refining the soul stones. Qin Feiyong still had 119 soul stones left in his hands. After thinking for a while, he simply gave them to Willow Tree and Yu Huang. Willow Tree and Yu Huang were the first to follow him after he entered the miracle, other than the Crocodile Emperor and a few other beasts. It could be said that Willow Tree and Yu Huang had made great contributions to him along the way. Since there were benefits, he naturally couldn't forget them. Willow Tree looked at the soul stones in front of it and frowned. Young master, what about you? You becoming stronger is equivalent to me becoming stronger. Is there a difference? Qin Feiyong laughed and got up to leave the ancient castle. He concealed his aura and swept towards the south like a ghost. Zhao Tai and the other 2 went to the east, west, and north respectively. Naturally, he could only go to the south. At the same time, in the ancient castle, Willow Tree and Yu Huang looked down at the soul stones in front of them and couldn't calm down for a long time. After a while, Willow Tree looked up at Xueqi, Junior Leopard, Li Jian, and the 6 elders and said in a deep voice, Young master is good to everyone. I believe you all have a deep understanding now. I hope that you all will never repay kindness with enmity. Willow Tree is right. If I find out in the future that anyone dares to go against me or even betray Boss Qin, I will be the first to not let him off. Yu Huang followed with a strong murderous intent in his eyes. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.